music.
He doesn't. So
Like,
we've been like, we have to, I don't know.
A year ago, I was like, we should play some throwbacks, and I was like, play Hey Ma by Cameron. And I swear to God, since that night, he's played it every single Friday and Saturday. And
he plays all the same music.
And completely
he never
ruined
plays
the
any
song.
new music.
Well, hits are
he
fucking
always
hits,
plays
man.
trap rap and EDM, like mumble rappers, and it's like, I don't want to hear
What do you
that.
wanna
Like,
hear?
I was just telling Holly, I was like, we need to hear pop. Like, where there's like, he never
Pop at
plays
a
any
bar?
pop rock. Like, we finally got him playing Seven Rings by Ariana just like this past couple of weeks. I don't know. I just like,
I don't know,
hate
man.
him.
It depends on
It's just
the
more
like
difficult than you think.
the
And
group
then
at the
it's, like,
bar.
because we're,
Like
like,
you play
such,
to
like-
the
because we're, like, a
audience. You
local
don't just
bar and
like
we're in
pick
kind of,
random
like, a
music that you
tight-knit
like. If you're a good
community.
DJ, that is.
It's like everybody knows everybody.
But you have
He's
to have,
gonna
like,
go and like cry
good
to
sense of
everybody
whatever the
about how
vibe
he's
is,
not
right?
DJing at the bar anymore.
Let me fix this shit
and
real
make
quick.
everybody feel sorry for him, like he did last time.
Oh shit.
Like, would he actually be able
Shit.
to feel sorry for him?
I don't know. I think
Do you
everybody
guys
hates
remember
him.
whenever, like, we suspended
go.
him from
Yeah,
DJing?
we
And then he
suspended him
got,
for like a
bunch of
month.
his friends to come up and they were all like, yeah, we wish Ryan was DJing.
Yeah, like the last time we suspended him for like a month, like towards the end of the month of his suspension, he had like all of his friends come up and like every weekend they'd just be all like, yeah, I wish Ryan was DJing, because he like went and started a group with all of his friends who also come to our bar a lot, so they were like complaining about him not playing, like they even care. Like they even came to the bar.
What was the
it just
alternative,
annoying. But yeah, let's just do that again.
Will once again stretch to the horizon.
Let's talk shit about this.
Penny is
Let's talk shit about our DJ live on stream.
Did she?
Oh my god!
She always does it.
F200.
Got him.
Oh no, I just ingested poison. Can you put Holly on screen to induce vomiting?
God damn it.
Excuse me?
Jana Parks cheers. F200.
Get like a
Penny
toothbrush.
Penny! What is wrong with you? We were just outside. Penny!
Got her all worked up. Talking shit about her favorite fucking DJ, man.
Why? Because she's a dumbass bitch. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, Penny? This is so shameful.
Kind of want to own a bar,
So
but
shameful, Penny.
then on the other hand, I don't.
Shameful. Yeah, just go downstairs. I don't know.
I feel like I'd be a good bar owner until it all
Okay,
collapsed.
sorry about that.
Or I'd turn into a
But
complete
anyway.
asshole.
God, he's just been especially annoying me today.
Like,
And then he
exceptionally
invited like a
asshole.
bunch of people to go, like, because he's playing at Dance Festopia, which is like the biggest EDM show in Kansas City.
Oh shit. I
He
fucked
like
that.
invited a bunch of people to go and have dinner to like celebrate him playing there, and it's just like, man, like, can we just stop celebrating you all
It's
the
just like,
time?
how many times have we done this? Like, this is my biggest show yet every weekend.
Oh my god. It'd be funny if we
Are you
fired him
jelly?
and then he blew up. It's not gonna happen. Like, EDM is dead. It's dead.
Is there?
You both sound the same, I know. How many dogs do you have? Oh, what the fuck? We have 6 dogs.
Yeah, I wouldn't picture that
But
accent
anyway,
for Kansas City.
oh,
for
the
real.
other thing that we were going to talk about is we're going to Chicago at the end of this month. We're going to be streaming pretty much like the whole weekend. We plan on just being like live like all the time, and even doing like some sleeping streams again. We're going to try to go the cheap route, but we're going to like plan this one out a lot better.
How fucking
And we
interesting
are
is
going
that?
to put
Sleep.
money towards doing different things. So I don't know. Like,
Well,
I
and
need
I
to do
think that
some
there's going to be a
research.
lot more.
There will probably be a lot more to do.
Yeah.
Like, we're definitely gonna go and experience like kind of the nightlife in Chicago on Friday and Saturday. We're gonna go to Boys Town. Jackson, thank you so much. We're gonna go to Boys Town. We're gonna have like a deep dish pizza, like that kind of stuff. I don't know. Probably visit some museums. Maybe even go to Lake Michigan. I don't know. I'm gonna like get it all planned out so we can have a really action-packed trip and just constantly be doing something. We're gonna be camping out, so we're gonna be making like campfire food. And probably be doing like campfire.
We're gonna go camp by a polluted cesspool.
Campfire.
That's basically what camping by Lake Michigan
is. We just don't
is.
have the budget for that. RVs are really expensive. They're really expensive, yeah. And it's like we want to like try to keep the trip as cheap as possible because I don't know, just traveling can get so expensive, and I don't want to like spend more traveling than like. I don't want to like put all of the money that I'm making towards traveling because I still have bills and shit to pay too. You know.
Wow.
But anyway.
Thank you for resubscribing.
So we're trying to go as cheap as possible.
Elliot just resubbed for 34 years.
Elliot, thank you
34
so much.
months, wow, smiling face.
Which
You're both beautiful, Casey accept.
thank you so much. Which since we're both what was I saying? Since we're gonna be
Casey's
camping, that's going to
queen,
save us so
for
much
real.
money in the first place. Instead of getting a hotel. Getting a hotel would be nice, but honestly, we just don't deserve it.
You know why I love
We
Casey
don't
Tron?
deserve, like,
She's
that
so
kind of luxury.
obnoxiously indignant. I just can't get enough.
So yeah, we just want to have like a really action-packed Chicago trip. If anybody has like any suggestions about Chicago or places that we should go or like areas we should definitely see, not East Chicago. I mean, like you can email me.
Not
My
East
email is
Chicago.
CaseyTronEnterprises@gmail.com.
Racist.
But yeah, I'm gonna
Racist.
start putting together the Chicago trip soon. As far as like the stream goes, I was really
Just ride the
disappointed
train
with
all
my
day and
streams
talk to
last
people.
week.
That'd be a fucking dope ass stream.
Just, I don't know. I've been like really exhausted
Oh,
lately.
wow. Thank you for resubscribing.
Pete Taryn, thank you so much. Thank you so much for subscribing for 16 months in a row. I've been really exhausted. Just ignore the dogs, they won't stop. I've been really exhausted, like, just like last week. I think like just that whole trip to, that like, trip to Nashville just really put me out, you know? It did, and like, whenever I got back, it was just like, I got back from like going on that trip and I was just behind on everything. And then like we had just finished like all of the work with the bar and like painting and stuff, but it was a good trip though. Yeah, it was really fun. I just like felt like whenever we got back from Nashville, like I felt like whenever we were in Nashville, we had like some really fun streams. And like I just felt like the momentum was really high. And then whenever we got back from Nashville, it was like we just like kind of plummeted. Right? We just kind of
I haven't
like
seen you on
plummeted.
train
Like,
wrecks
it was
in
just,
forever,
like,
man.
Like, I don't know, I just wasn't happy with last week's streams. Sleeping stream was great, thank you. But I want to put like a lot more into streaming this week. I'm going to try to be live like quite a bit this week. And then like of course we do the bar streams on Friday and Saturday. I feel like the bar streams can be interesting because I think like there's the, like I think one of the more interesting aspects of it is that it's like mine and my sister's bar. So then there's like, you guys get to kind of see like the whole business side of it and like know how much we're making or like how well we're doing or whatever. But I think I could probably like narrate it a little bit better and maybe keep you guys a little bit more informed on like what's going on with the bar streams, and I could probably be a little bit more social with like some of our regulars and whatnot.
Bar stream is an
But,
excellent idea.
I don't know.
I wish I would have been
stream
stream or
last
been
week.
capable
I was,
of
like, really
streaming.
low energy. Honestly,
what,
like
yesterday?
I was pretty
Or before?
anxious last week at the bar. Like I was just anxious
insane
about
fun.
making money.
Been
You know, like just
insane.
being up there and like it being my business. It gets me like a little bit anxious and it makes it hard to focus on the stream. You have to go to West Inglewood. Is that in Chicago?
Inglewood.
I love the bar drama. I think that the bar should be like pretty fun this weekend though because I think we're gonna be a lot busier. I don't know. I should probably ask Brett. Brett's one of our regulars up at the bar, and he used to do bouncing. Like, honestly, I'm probably gonna ask him to bounce for us this weekend, or I'll ask him. I don't know. If I ask Brett to do it, I won't have to, like, if I could just be like, oh, it's busy on Friday, and he would just do it for us, like, you know, Friday. But I'm like, if it's not busy, I don't want to have to pay a bouncer. Why is it gonna be busy? We just put out a bunch of ads. Thought, thank you. Benji, how much can you drink? I'm not a big drinker.
But you own a bar?
Are you in a
Why the fuck do you own a bar?
Kind of.
You don't.
Was it surprising that you had 1 KV
You don't
the
own a
entire
bar
time
and
you were
make money,
sleeping?
for real.
Yeah, but then
Unless
at the
you're, like,
same time,
New
like
York
I
City or
feel
something
like
along those lines.
the prime time to get on for streaming, because I felt like whenever we did the sleeping stream, we started peaking at around like noon. Like, I feel like I'm not starting my streams early enough. Like, I really need to try to get live. Like, I started this stream at 4:30. I really need to try to get live at like
Get that
2 or
bitch.
3.
Casey and I have had a really hard time just like getting up and about and starting.
Oh god. Like these past couple of days, I've just wanted to sleep in,
And it's been raining.
and
I
it's
think
been like all rainy and
the same
shit.
for everybody. Like everybody kind of.
We need to eat better. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, honestly, that's like something we've been trying to work on. I started yesterday. I didn't eat anything bad, really. I did have something. I had a coffee,
Not bad.
but
Yeah.
The fuck?
I think we should have some better streams
It's
this week
Alabama
than last week,
abortion
and then
ban?
we're gonna start planning for the Chicago stream. And we have a few ideas with the script. We're gonna really start working on the script. Me and Holly, we're gonna start working on the script. And Sean writing a script. Yeah, Sean's gonna be writing an episode for Chicago,
Oh shit.
Oh, wow.
which I'm really excited about.
A reaction time is fuck.
oh my god,
Shut the fuck up!
Years. Hi, Scout.
Omega Lol scripted. Yeah, we want our streams to be heavily scripted. We want it to be like heavily scripted because scripted streams are just better. But yeah, I guess should we like let's cook this food. Fuck.
Okay. That Sam guy said that he was gonna
Oh, shit.
message
Oh,
me. He told me DJ
Maybe that's her.
Dylan, and I was like, oh, like, I kind of want to find somebody else. And then he said that Mojo guy,
Who?
and I think
Where is he played at?
I think he plays at the side cafe sometimes. Like, he's like a little older. He plays like a lot of hip hop and pop music, so that would be a good fit for us.
No. I mean,
Yeah.
What's going on?
Hey. We're streaming right now, just so you know. You're not on camera, it's facing us.
Oh, wow.
He's in your room. He's locked
yeah, let's take the tank into the back line.
Yeah,
Fucking
Mom,
dumb.
why do you never say hi to the stream?
Hi guys.
They said hi, Mom. No. Mom, why do you hate the stream? Will you let Penny upstairs?
No, I just got on.
Why do you hate
Oh,
this
wow.
stream?
Don't hate anybody.
To this stream.
Nobody in
You just
Nobody in
alcohol.
particular.
I don't know.
Jenna Puff, cheers. X200. We love you, Mom.
No, balls and ears. God damn. Yeah, damn. You need some more fucking energy, people?
Get that beast dog away from my dog.
Get that beast.
They have like 9 fucking dogs.
Leave
just missed my
Atticus
one.
alone. Well, we had to feed these dogs. Can you just get these dogs to shut up? They haven't shut up. get these dogs to shut up. And it's your dogs. Alright, so let's... Shut the fuck up! Stop!
Oh shit.
I'm ready to get a shot. Stop! I'm ready to get a shot collar for all of these animals. I can't do it.
Fuck.
Oh my
I
god.
can't take it.
I'm a killer, boys.
We hand me some.
We have 6 dogs and 7 cats.
We hand me some.
What I'm saying.
Alright, so
Fucking
what
insane.
we're cooking for you guys, today is we've got this is pork cube steak. It's pork cube steak. It was only $3.35. And then we got this mushroom gravy to go with it. So it's pork chops and mushroom gravy. And then we also got some
cube steak is not
broccoli
fucking
and cheese.
pork chops.
To this stream.
Crackle, thank
Who
you.
just
There's
resubbed
no
for
chop
21
involved.
years.
Oh, wow.
Smiley
Stay.
face.
Oh, Tammy, leave that sweet little dog alone. She doesn't mean any harm. Come here, Piggy. Dumb bitch. Come here. She doesn't mean any harm.
I love you, girls. You're amazing.
I love you too.
Both very much.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll fuck that
Are
up.
you going to sleep? No. What are you going to do?
I'm gonna walk the dogs here shortly.
Walk it down.
Okay.
She finally
One
wrote the
sec.
script.
You got what?
Okay, so yeah, we've got. So here we have to explain what we're doing.
Oh, okay. So I put this gravy in this pan.
_Japanese_girl cheers. X200. Watch Holly write a script where she finds love in Chicago, only for it to get retconned.
Only for it to get what? Retconned? What does that mean? So this is the mushroom gravy.
Retcon, let's look that
So we're
shit
heating
up.
up this
So I'm
mushroom
gonna
gravy.
give this a little bit of olive oil on it.
Retcon, revise.
Who?
It's
Carol?
amazing. Yeah.
Holly, really, put them up.
Carol's not. Carol's the only clean animal in this house.
Carol.
This hungering world.
Sounds like the cat,
No,
movie,
that's
not the
okay.
cat.
Wait, where are all the other cats? Oh, here's Daddy. He's blending in. But yeah, so we're making pork chops and mushroom gravy. So we've got the gravy going here. And we've got this pan heated up and we put the pork chops on there. They're cubed pork chops. We're making pork
pork
chops and
chops.
mushroom gravy and then we're gonna do some cheese and broccoli. We're on a diet. So
This is about as diet as it's gonna get.
Pork
Like,
equals
at
that.
least
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, this is a win for us. This is a big win for us. Diet. I know it's not. Hold on. I'm gonna put, like, we need better lighting. Like, we need all the help we can get.
If we understand this may not be a diet for some people, but to us this is very much.
Yeah. Like, sure, this isn't like the healthiest thing we could eat right now, but I think it's a start. Deep fried gravy. Mushroom gravy is just so good. And, you know, this is actually low carb. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind. It's a start indeed. Holly looking voluptuous, thank you. Mushrooms have no taste. Well, mushroom gravy is much different. Mushroom gravy is just like, honestly, I could drink it by itself. It's full of salt. It's so flavorful. It has a very salty taste to it. But then also like the cooked mushroom in it, it's delicious. Mushroom gravy
And then,
is
okay,
so
hold on.
good.
Let them see how I
Oh,
season.
hold on. Holly, you always over
That's right.
season.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say I
Garlic
lost the
salt.
lid.
Will you just not do like too much?
Okay, well,
Holly always does so much. Hold on.
Okay. Alright, that's probably good. We'll get the other side too. And then this is, what is that? That's mixed onion.
Oh, the mixed onion. We've got this gravy. It's heated. We could honestly like start letting that, like, it's heated enough. Put up this trash. I guess, how do you want to cook this broccoli and cheese?
Get fucked on.
Put it in the microwave. Okay, I'm gonna get this broccoli and cheese going.
Tasty as fuck.
Oh, wow. New subscriber. Thank you.
Dr. Smelter, thank you so much for subscribing and welcome to the Triple XL Network.
This is,
Triple X.
Yeah, we're Triple XL style.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So you're just gonna take the dogs on a walk?
Yeah, good luck with that.
Pablo and Dusty.
Fucking one.
Mom, you know that we're going to Chicago, don't you?
I did not know.
Xander's going.
You know we're going to Chicago, right?
At the end of May, he already requested off work.
Reminds me of a trip that I took.
But he didn't want you to
I
know.
just turned 30.
So don't say
Just hopped in
anything
a car.
about it.
worried you'll ruin it.
Or a truck, I should say.
It's too much.
Carrots?
No, that's not.
Brand new.
I don't want no carrots.
Is that like too thick? That's enough. That's good.
Yeah, my dad borrowed me his truck and they drove from Wisconsin to up in Colorado. Yeah, no idea.
My God. What?
I don't think he knew until after I called him back or I came back home.
God.
I mean, it's pathetic. Mom, do you think it's pathetic how we live here?
Mom always talks about how pathetic it is the way we live. She says it's fucking pathetic.
Got him! Oh.
Nice booty, Casey. Thank you. There are some points she's made.
Oh, wow.
Friendship, thank you so much.
Subscribing to this stream.
Oh, what happened to Holly?
I'm underscore ships Jeffrey
Oh,
us
yeah.
for 26 years. Casey's her.
Holly just constantly bruises herself. Holly, show them your bruise.
There's a couple of them just stepping back.
Yeah. Turn to the side a little and show that big one.
Okay, this one.
The one on the front. Yeah, Holly just always has bruises. She walked into a table. She bruises very easy. She's gonna try to go a week without getting any bruises.
I haven't gotten any this week.
She hasn't got any this week. Like maybe if Holly could get to Chicago bruise free, that would be like a miracle. We're praying on it.
We'll see. I have thin blood, I think, right?
I don't know. Look, here come the cats. Fuck. I'm like, I just want them to see. Hold on.
17. I think you rolled 17 on my
See,
house.
Carol.
Oh, wow. New subscriber. Thank you.
Carol's about to get into it with these other cats.
Chrome, welcome to the Triple XL Network.
Hi.
One fat underscore Japanese underscore girl cheers.
I love
X200.
Casey Tron and all.
That explains all the potholes scattered around Kansas City.
So, do you think those are, maybe we should crisp them up a little bit more? I don't know.
I'm thinking Chris.
I don't know what we want
I've
to
never
do
actually.
yet.
I've only seen her on like Garage.
Yeah.
Train wrecks. Oh, motherfucker.
Am I a member now? Yeah, you have to join. You have to subscribe to join the Triple XL network. And we actually do accept all body types. We're body positive, so even skinny people are welcome.
But we prefer.
But yeah, we prefer fat.
Well, we say
I'm with you, babe.
Thick. We prefer thick. Yeah, we're inclusive though.
I'm gonna put some Parmesan.
Oh yeah, Parmesan sounds good on there. That's a good idea.
Put in some of that.
Yeah, put some Parmesan on them. Hey! You dogs! What? Yeah, they're starting a fight. Rosie.
Sponsor for the fucking
There's that cat.
9
We got
dogs,
these cats.
25 cats.
Oh,
Jesus
Carol,
Christ.
get in there.
Yeah,
Yes,
get into that mushroom.
get in there, Carol. I love how she dips her hand. It's so cute. Oh, the
gotta-
cute kitty. She's like a little
We
raccoon.
gotta pull some shiznit right
Wow,
here.
Carol. How cute. She's a good girl. Ratty? Oh, here, hey, Ratty. Here, Ratty. Ratty, you can have some. Here, Ratty, you can have some of the gravy. Here, Rad. He doesn't want it now.
It's choosy tiger.
Yeah, like they look. Yeah, soak them in that gravy. Here, let me get it on film. Now we're adding the mushroom gravy. Yeah, and just like spread it all over in there. Like get it just really. Yeah, that looks good.
Yes.
Let me check this. Oh, I need to get this in there longer. It needs to be in there for like a while. There. The heat is way too high. Well, it's turned down now, so just chill out.
It's not that high.
Calm down. Yeah, that looks excellent. Wow.
See what else is going on here. Should we switch it up a little bit?
Professional cooking. Does my makeup look? I feel like I
Do
like
you girls have earbuds for the iPhone 8?
I have some.
Why do you need them? I have some AirPods.
Well, I want the Apple because they sound a lot better.
I have some AirPods you could use, but you have to give them back.
Okay.
Alright, time to discover some new shit. Oh shit, Amarath. Amarath is live. That's like an instant 2 viewers right there.
Society.
Oh yeah. Tell you what viewers, if there are any viewers. Array, chat, blah blah blah. What am I looking for here? Zero viewers on all streams. Actually, I mean, she's attractive. I hear some interesting shit as well. How many fucking views? 2.8. This is my right here.
Kind of controversial. How do you feel about that, man?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, Monday, thank you so much. 2 months in a row, are you sure that's only it? Only 2 months in a row we've been together? That doesn't sound right.
We've
That doesn't sound right at all. Patty Whack, thank you so much for the bits as well. Yeah, there's Poseidon and there's Super Poseidon. And Super Poseidon's been here for 2 months. Maybe. You think you forgot to resub for a while? Oh, that's what I like to hear. Hi guys, hi Cole.
You know who Kyle Kulinski
Oh,
is?
this tea tastes awful.
Huh. Oh fuck.
I swear I made the
Did
name
I
before
not
knew
follow
about
her?
him. No, Super
I
Poseidon,
feel
please.
like that's
We're just razzing
a
you.
failure
But it's
on
like
my
really
side.
fun that you're here and we love you. Can you bring back Witchby again? Of course, Socrates. Of course. She will ride again. But it's not a full moon right now, so like I don't think it's the time. Unless it is, in which case then oops. Guys, I have chocolate milk.
Is it a full moon? May 18th. Fucking me, it's like the opposite.
Well, other streamers can talk about it.
Oh
I don't
my
think it'd be
gosh.
against the terms of service for me to talk about anything that I want to talk about. But also,
I don't.
it would break like my terms of service of this platform, which is to like not comment on shit that I don't really know about.
Good call.
I didn't go to PAX East. I wasn't in
Oh,
anyone's private
damn.
Discord messages. Ah, fuck.
Damn!
I've been here on my channel just like
Damn!
dying from happiness.
When are my tits gonna pay
oh
off?
fuck, thank you so much, Poseidon. Thank you so much. Wow, rat pubes. What do you think? But I'm glad you got a sub, dude. I'm glad you got a fucking sub. Like Oreos sub, no, that's reason. I mean, I have tea. I have Oreos and tea.
I'm on the case.
Thank you so much, Poseidon. Thank you so much.
I just like him. The vibe.
Oh, Socrates, I'm sorry. Maybe you'll get a sub when I'm dressed as a witch again.
Alright. What else is going on? How does my stream look? Let's check that shit out. I haven't used this service before, so I don't know if it's like completely wonky or whatever. VIP, rating 1, blah blah blah. Okay.
Windmill, windmill for the land, love forever hand in hand. Take it all out on your stride, it is taking falling down. Love forever, love is free, let's turn forever, you and me. Windmill, windmill for the land, it's everybody
Laughing gas, these hazmats, fast cat, lining them up like ass crack. Ladies, ponies at the track, it's my chocolate attack. Shit, I'm stepping in harder this year. Yeah, been repping in harder this year. Watch me as I gravitate. Ha 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 ha. We gon' ghost town, this Motown with your sound. You in the blink, gon' bite the dust, can't fight with us. With your sound, you kill the aim, so don't stop. Get it, until the cheddar hit her. Watch the way I
Does
navigate.
YouTube count music? got a YouTube watcher. I don't know if it's me or somebody else. But if it's not me, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I just can't see it on Streamlabs, so can't react accordingly. Because somebody's doing it. Alright, we need to get some sex into this stream, like right now. Try something. Test it. 1, 2, 3. Does that shit work? Okay, 5 of 5. Apparently we're streaming on 5 different platforms. So if you're new to the stream, I'm bringing politics, I'm bringing to playing Aaron while I'm kind of stream shit. I'm big into like viewing other people's streams and kind of providing commentary on that. I love the movies. Curious how the title is translated too, or like the category. If you missed it, I've been a streamer on Twitch for a number of months. But we just switched over to a new platform. We stream on let me see if I can remember exactly. We're on Periscope, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on maybe Facebook. Oh, we lost the viewer already. That's cool. Balls. 0, 1, and 2. I feel like that. I feel like that there's a bit more. I've got a pee and some beers all night, so urination is part of the process. Does anybody know if we're looking out on the day of another dream? If you're into controversial subjects, I'm all about it. But throw something up in the chat. We'll talk about our shops today. That sort of thing. We can have that sort of conversation. I'm all about the free speech initiative and what that means, politics in general. I guess you would call me a economic conservativist. Liberal and social issues, slightly SJW, but also hitting the hardcore SJWs that should be compromised as a result of their own views. That's disgusting. I'd love to host a Richard Spencer on my podcast so I can expose him for the sick puppy that he is, that sort of thing. Beyond that, What are you guys up to tonight? Got a whole 2 viewers. Anything fun? Anything interesting? Anyone doing some like good trips? That'd be nice to talk about. Big into the drug culture. Everybody needs to talk about it.
Feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, but not for long. The future is coming on. I'm happy. I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, but not for long. The future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on.
Yeah.
Finally, someone let me out of my cage. Now, time for me is nothing, 'cause I'm counting no A's. Nah, I couldn't be there. Nah, you shouldn't be scared. I'm good at repairs, and I'm under each snare. Intangible. Bet you didn't think, so I command you to. Panoramic view. Look, I'll make it all manageable. Pick and choose, sit and lose. All you different crews, chicks and dudes, who you think is really kicking tunes. Picture you getting down in a picture too, like you lit the fuse. You think it's fictional, mystical, maybe spiritual hero who appears in you to clear your view when you're too crazy. Lifeless to those, the definition for what life is. Priceless to you because I put you on the hype shit. You like it? Gun smoke, you're righteous with one token. Psychic among no possess you with one go.
I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, not for long. The future is coming on.
Other than that, my day job is
sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, not for long. The future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on.
The essence, the basics, without it you make it. Allow me to make this childlike in nature. Rhythm, you have it or you don't, that's a fallacy, I'm in them. Every sprouting tree, every child of peace, every cloud and sea. You see with your eyes and see destruction and demise. Corruption in the skies from this fucking enterprise. Now I'm sucked into your lives through rust, so not as much, but percussion to provide for me as a guide. You can see me now cause you don't see with your eyes. You perceive with your mind, that's the end. So I'ma stick around with Russ and be a mentor. But a few rounds so motherfuckers remember what the thought is. I brought all this so you can survive when law is lawless. Feeling sensations that you thought was dead. No squealing.
I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, not for long. The future is coming on. I'm feeling glad I got sunshine.
You ever had dreams about like, not exactly what's gonna happen to you, but like an interpretive representation of what's going to happen?
It's coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on.
And then you reach back on that and
It's coming on. It's coming on. It's
why did this fucking dream
coming on. It's coming on. My future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. My future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. My future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. My future is coming on. It's coming on. It's coming on. My future.
It did not hit. Probably left in this game. Just gonna force it. So we'll probably shift it up. I need to get a few more beers in me so I can be provocative enough to but we'll switch it up. We'll try to get a good stream and review that sort of thing. Maybe we'll switch on to live stream fails, do a running review sort of thing. We'll be going for about 3 more hours here. If nothing else, it'll be a nice stream to fall asleep to. $2, by the way, is not a incentive to thing. It's a commentary on capitalism. Almost.
Coming out, coming out, coming out, coming out, coming out, coming out. It's there.
Good shit. If we run out of beer, we might switch it up. We'll take donos for shots of vodka. That's okay. Who's in chat, please? House. This shit should be on live stream fast. I should probably change my shirt. I think I was streaming with the same shirt a few minutes ago. To qualify that though, it was my birthday, day before yesterday, and I slept not at my house. And then I woke up again in my room, burning off the
isolation. 'Cause right now that's the ball where we've changed.
Yeah, you got me, bro.
And if you
got
come
me.
back
Damn
to
it.
find me, you better have good aim. Shoot it true. I need you in the future. That's why I'm calling you. Calling you. I'm the lonely twin, the left hand. Reset myself and get back on track. I don't want this isolation. See the state I'm in now. Caught in the heart with the right ball.
Even though I've never been one to
Now that's the ball where we
Sometimes you have to fit into a crowd rather than like a rural Wisconsin
shoot it true. I want
where,
you in the picture. That's why I'm calling you.
where you really have to fit in. And this is now I have a rural. There's a dual meaning with camouflage also into society.
See the state I'm in now.
Go! Where the fuck are my teammates? 4, 9, or 22. A badass motherfucker. Saw it first. Fucking cool. That did fucking nothing. My mouse is illegal. It was so much. TV. $2, enjoy it. Next up, we're going to get some kiddies on the stream and try to find a clinical debate or something along those lines. We're getting like that 6 o'clock hour where the big streamers turn up a notch. Triple fucking kill, right? How did you get that?
yo. Everything that I stop.
Press the button to begin.
All my life, me ever have my gun, so me have to move sharp like me knife. All my life, me pray that when me get wealthy, I'm a wife. All my life, this system force me to be a killer just like Rodney Price. All my life, all my life. One tear Kobe, some boy don't know me. Though I'm rough, them can't believe a grandma drew me. Know a few popcorn songs, oh, and feel them know me. 4 mile me used to walk to school, them know man's story. Ha! Oh, me gain up all those glory. The world is mine, the world life, me taking slowly.
GG, my boys.
No, my bones had story. Anyway, in the world, my dogs, them round me. Me laugh and collect those trophies.
We live, boys. Oh, we got 2 viewers.
I'm holding no light like frisbee. The dream, I'm gonna leave that with me.
Or not on stream, on stream labs.
All my life, me dream for who knows. Land, cars and bikes.
See if we can get some political shit going on here. Solid commentary. Casey, Babe. Politics. Scoring to score. Hasan Habib. Threeway with Destiny and Kulinski. Turned on already. Game starting soon. Alright, so if you're not familiar, Destiny left wing, and this is kind of why I hate his stream. Destiny left wing recently cut Hasan out of his debate team, so there's a little bit of animosity going on there. Hasan is one of the commentaries for TYT Politics. And then Kyle Kulinski, he is the mouthpiece for Secular Talk, if you're not familiar with that. So you can check it out. I think they're all on YouTube. Destiny for sure, Hasan, yeah, everybody's on YouTube. So Destiny is going to be, just search YouTube Destiny debate. You'll find some cool shit. He's excellent debater. I think some of his, I mean, he bases a lot of his views on not on feeling. So he's debated for example, he believes there's a moral support for what's it called when you fuck your mother, what's it called? Give me the word, please. Lord, lift me up. What is the word? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So he's a very good debater. I think some of his views are generally fucked up, but that being said, what can you say? He's awesome at debating. Hasan Hiker, apparently. I don't know what his last name is based on these things, but he is a mouthpiece for TYT Politics. He is the nephew, I believe, for Yank Uyghur. Has been working there for a number of years. And then we have Kyle Kulinski, which is a left-wing mouthpiece, more of a progressive, similarly to Hasan Piker. Let's see what they have to offer. Hopefully this stream starts pretty soon. Buckle up, bucko. Bash the bash. So I love his intro. It's very Pepe the Frog-esque. It's very, but on the socialist side of things, I guess you can associate really Pepe with him, other than it being like fuck the normality of the political system. Slamming beers. We have a 3-pack, then we're shifting over to I've got some other shit, and then a bottle of vodka that would put me in the hospital if I drank the whole thing. But speaking of which, alcohol and alcohol poisoning and urination is a necessary step in the process.
With anger and discontent, someone seeking in search of life reward. I'm a peace-loving decoy, ready for retaliation. I change the whole location to a pine box 6 under. Impulsive, relax, wild wonder. Orders give to me is strike, and I'm thunder. While lighting fast reflexes on constant alert from the constant hurt that seems limitless with no drop of pressure. Seems like everybody's out to test until they see you break. You can't conceal the hate that consumes you. I'm the reason why you feel up your Sousa. Chill with your old lady at the tilt. I got a 90-day extension and I feel with guilt from things done and seen. Your water's from a bottle, mine from a canteen. At night I hear the shots swing, so I'm a light sleeper. The cost of life seems to get cheaper. Out in the desert with a street sweeper. The war is over, so said the speaker. With the fight too hard, they him, I'm just a pawn. So he can advance.
Go to the gas station.
Remember when they used to dance?
16
All I wanted
oral
to dance.
ounces. 4-pack. It was not sold for 4-pack. 8% volume. Don't think you pay $1 for it as well. Less financially stable to buy the Steel series, but they're pretty yummy unless they are completely rotten from sitting on your counter for a couple of days, which this one is, but I'll drink it, whatever. Hasan, fucking pick your shit up. Yeah, this is really cool. This is actually really cool. So if I lose a viewer on one platform, I get another one on a different platform. If you missed the original conversation, we just switched it up so that instead of just streaming on Twitch, which if you're an affiliate or you're a partner, you can't do. You agreed not to stream at the same time. But if you're not an affiliate or you're not a partner, you can stream on as many platforms as you want. And I guess I haven't looked at all the rules for all these other platforms, but I think it's an excellent way to increase your audience. If you want to check me out, my main platform is on twitch.tv/QBucks. We talk a lot about politics. We kind of like break into various people's streams. We look at Reddit recaps. We look at live stream fails. We kind of recap that sort of thing. We also play a lot of video games on the board. I want to keep this fun, keep it easy, keep it entertaining. If you're into provocative shit, I love talking about incest. Incest, that's the word I was looking for earlier. Destiny does an excellent debate of incest. Check that out on YouTube. Use my pay as well. I also love Trainwrecks TV, Squad W, that sort of thing. Cheers to you guys. Not necessarily an incel, but I know what I want. And, very particular. And I think that's a social construct too, because you get these Instagram models that look hot as fuck. You get these people on Tinder, you get these people, all the social networks, whatever it is, and they look hot as fuck, and then you're like, okay, maybe that's attainable, maybe that's like the norm, everybody is artistically pleasing, but in reality, everybody's like, this is all real. I'm not Photoshop. This is all real. I am the sex with you. Anyway, not a sponsor of the show, but Steel Series Reserve Ally Series Spiked Tropic Storm. I wonder how the people of Cuba and Puerto Rico will feel about it.
Take it in your heart now.
Anyway, Sana Bibi. All right, let's kill the gorillas.
Chill the fuck out.
Chill the fuck out.
We're cutting the introduction today.
Oh,
straight to the
boo!
content.
That's the best
For
part
all
of
of
it.
those people who will come in late,
All right, let's
assuming
get
that it's going
this-
to be a long intro,
let's get this
this
shit.
is what you get, ladies and gentlemen.
Motherfucker.
This is what you freaking get. All right, I'm joining them right now.
All right. What do we got? League.
Hello?
Browser, that's
Can
what
you guys hear me?
No, not league, bro.
Yeah, what's up?
Oh shit! I'm not gonna be able to put my camera up, unfortunately, because
We already know what you look like. It's okay.
Okay, cool. I'm just letting y'all know because I don't have the tech prowess that you have, Destiny. Wait, how do you have 2 cameras? You have 2 cameras, and are you not streaming with your camera? Like, what's going on?
No, I have 2 cameras. You described it right away. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, okay.
What a noob.
Let me see if I can actually do that. I probably can't. Do you know how to do
This
live?
doesn't sound like the Young Turks Hasan, right?
Do you know how to do the
Yeah. Dude from the Young
okay,
Turks
chill.
doesn't
Do you know how to do
understand
the? Do
technology,
you know how to like
but he
on?
has like a multi.
Oh, you got company back there. Okay, that's
The fuck
tight.
out.
So, are you gonna be able to focus or?
Titties? What?
You gonna be able to focus or you got guests at your
Titties?
house?
No, I'm here. What are you talking about?
Oh, okay. I'm just letting you know. That,
He's in
like,
like
I
a
saw what was
fucking
going on in the
robe.
background. So.
With
Nothing is going
his
on.
beard
Oh, okay.
and
All right. No, it's fine.
entanglement
It's
sticking
fine,
out.
yeah. You know, let's be a little professional today,
Let's
all right,
see here.
Destiny?
Window capture. We want.
Okay.
Romesh.
Coming from me, of course. It's rather ironic, but. Okay, so you guys are already talking to one
Twitch.
another. I heard you guys were talking about spoilers and shit. You can keep up the conversation
go.
while I try
All
to
right.
figure out on my end how exactly I'm going to lay out everybody.
What's up?
And like their in my amateur ass way of trying to do this. So
Yeah.
I thought
I
Haas was,
forced
like,
myself
good with
in to be a
tech stuff, but
professional
I guess not,
streamer.
man.
no,
In
I'm
terms
not.
of
I was telling
tech.
you already
Like, I
earlier,
understand a
Kyle,
lot
when I
of
was
the
trying to
shit,
get
and I
you
know how
when I was
to
troubleshooting for you.
multitask.
This is
Most of these
precisely what I was telling you.
motherfuckers are
I am
like,
not very good with this tech
do
stuff.
we click on
It's
this
not very
shit? No?
consistent on your position when you literally tweeted at that poor woman that you were harassing that you were a gamer and not a journalist. I don't understand how you can't be good at tech stuff.
You can be
Right?
a gamer and not be very good at tech stuff, though.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I
should
don't. I feel
change
like if you
the,
stream on Twitch, it's like you are by
fuckability.
definition good at this stuff. But
No, this
I'm
is
wrong,
true.
Apparently.
This.
No, this is true. It definitely
Still
streaming on
trying to
Twitch
figure out
requires an element of tech
Restream.io,
proficiency that no other field I've ever worked in has ever required.
True.
And it was rather difficult for me to
Very specific.
get past the learning curve and figure it all out. But ever since then, I'm rather awful at it now.
How do I change the title?
Yeah, because it's a whole nother aspect to like. You don't
Titles.
want to do that part of it. You just want to be the dude on camera that talks, and then when you have to figure out the whole other angle of it, that's like the grunt work.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
It's pretty awful. Wait. Okay. So, I should. I'm trying to figure out how I should like.
Destiny, are you in hour like?
I wonder if
10 of
Kyle
streaming?
Kulinski.
Hour 10 of stream. Oh no,
let's
I've only
see
been
here.
live for like 3 or 4 or 5 hours or something.
YouTube.
Something like that.
See, I like how the difference between a YouTuber and a Twitch person
Kulinski.
can be summed up in just that little nugget right there. Because you said, "Oh yeah, only 3 or 4 or 5 hours." Meanwhile, if it was me,
Motherfucker.
that's like a super long time.
Yeah, sure. But the difference between my content and your content is that you probably spend a great deal of time thinking
live?
about stuff and playing it out. And I'm like, well, we're going to watch other people's videos today for 6 hours. So
Nah.
I mean, don't be too hard on yourself.
Let's see if Destiny.
Yeah,
is
I can
live.
see that. There's a lot more like obnoxious and annoying prep that I have to do, which is like the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
I mean,
when I have to sit there and read for 5 hours, I'm like,
Yeah, he's live.
That's
So
why
we
I
can
try to
actually
do,
do
a,
a
little bit
better
of both. Like,
stream
I try to do like
than
I try to add an
fucking
element of
either of
prep
these
into like
motherfuckers.
certain parts of stream. I think you can do that. Like you can have a structured stream. You have a podcast, Destiny. Don't act like you don't do prep work either.
do like
Yeah, a little,
this.
but doing like actual like scripted prepared content is really really. Oh, you know this. You do scripted prepared content. It's really fucking hard. Like the
Shots
risk
fired.
reward is not at all in your favor.
Shots
Like I
fired.
can sit here and shit out like 10 hours of very low effort content, but to script out even like a 30-minute video would take like 2 or 3 streams worth of like effort for me to do. Like it's a lot of shit to do.
I mean, I'm not like scripted. It's just the
Tried it.
prep is
I
annoying
dumped
that I
my
have to
prep.
like reference
I
articles
dumped my
and
prep
stuff.
on
But some, I mean, to be
Destiny's,
fair, there's a lot. I
Reddit.
think there's a lot more crossover with what we
And
do
immediately-
than maybe a lot of people realize.
Immediately.
There's plenty of segments I do where I just see a news clip or see commentary by a Republican or something, and I'm
Was
like,
removed.
I have to talk about this because it's so crazy. And that's very similar to what I've seen you do. And
Oh, sure, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, so there's at least
You're,
there's like a half crossover for the stuff we do. I think the only difference is, you know, you'll do a lot more live
Gotta
back and
watch
forth
2
with people,
fucking
like
streams
people,
to-
you know, who
or,
call in and stuff.
advertisements
And
to
then
get
for
into
me, it's unfortunately, a lot of like I gotta
Unfortunately,
read
we're
this
not going to
article
get
and then
Kyle
break down
Kulinski
certain
on the live
parts of the
stream,
article and
but
give an analysis
amazing
of it or
that I
whatever.
can do this.
But outside of that, it's very similar. And obviously, you do so many more hours than I do.
Has no idea what the fuck he's doing.
Sure.
Be able to do.
Kyle, what do you want as your as your header? Like secular talk?
Yeah, secular talk.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Whatever you want to put. Kyle Kulinski, secular talk. I don't care.
He's playing fucking. What is this game?
This is like the most scuffed setup I've ever.
It is super scuffed.
It's just so garbage. Anyway, whatever.
No capture.
Fuck it.
I'll do it better, Hasan. You can just reference everybody to my stream. We'll see what's up.
That's me.
Let's see. From Twitch.
So this is live Destiny streaming this, but you're not on your Twitch yet, right?
No,
Hasan?
I am. I started
Oh,
already.
okay.
I started streaming as well. People are just in the chat. They can just.
I'll tweet this. Let me tweet it. Dude, did I like semi-doxed you earlier?
Shit.
My bad, Destiny.
Wait, how'd you dark? Oh, you mean when you talked about my friend's Twitter account?
Yeah, I was like, I'll be streaming with Haas and Destiny, and I put your @ and then everybody in the thing was like, bro, you shouldn't have done that.
You're fine, don't worry.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's almost a meme at this point.
Perhaps I'm behind the times here, but what did you get kicked off Twitter for?
So I actually finally got an answer to this. So the problem was for inciting like violence against like groups
imagine
due to
that,
race.
Destiny.
So I debate a lot of like alt-righters.
I will bomb you.
Are, like, we're like white supremacists who aren't really white, so it's kind of strange. Like people like Nick Fuentes or like another guy called like Braving Ruin or Tara McCarthy. Like a lot of these people like aren't like fully white, so I don't understand how they like argue in favor of a white ethno state. And I think the tweet that got me banned was I had a picture of like all three of these like white nationalists that weren't like 100% white, and I tweeted something like the new alt-right ethno state is shaping up to be more diverse than a Disney Channel original movie. And I think that like they read that tweet and they were saying that like even if I'm not racist, like I can be inciting people to hate people because of their race, and so I got banned for that. Yeah.
You know, and what's so annoying is that if people on the right, these right-wing commentators were actually principled, there would have been like a massive social media outpouring and outcry in favor of you.
Oh no, they were all happy when I got banned. They all celebrated.
It's not just that, but they also then turn around and execute these targeted doxing campaigns and comb through your tweets and stuff. One of the most recent examples that I can think of is what Mike Cernovich used to do, and I think he kind of gave up on it now, but remember with the pedophile stuff with James Gunn and even Sam Cedar and a bunch of other people that he went after.
Yeah, exactly. They got Sam Cedar fired. Eventually he got rehired, but they got him fired, and like they did this social media mob campaign to try to get him fired.
Now
and
we're
it's like, wait, weren't you guys just
situated
screaming about how it's like, whatever, pick an example. It's messed up that Roseanne got let go because she tweeted some politically incorrect stuff.
So
it's like,
please don't say that. Oh God, it was so much more than just politically incorrect.
No.
I know you're trying to make a point, but oh God.
I agree with you, but I'm saying that they will, whenever it's somebody on their side,
I love you.
There's
say,
no
like,
principles.
you should be allowed to say like really edgy stuff, bro. Like, what are you talking about? But when it's somebody on the left and they get banned, it's radio silence. It's crickets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only is it crickets, but sometimes they like actively do that. And one can make the argument that they're taking advantage of how easily duped liberals are when it comes to this sort of stuff. And I think this is definitely an avenue that Kyle and I and even you, Destiny, will agree on. I think that there is definitely something to be said about how frustrated liberals get and how quickly liberals get frustrated at things and mobilize even against their own without looking at any sort of context.
You ever heard of like Reset Era?
Me?
No.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big like left-leaning forum. It's really funny how torn those people are up on me. Like half of them talk about how like I'm basically like a racist bigot, and then the other half are like, oh well, he's actually pretty chill. It's just really funny reading it. It's pretty insane.
I didn't even know what Kotaku in Action was until they.
Oh God, that cancerous subreddit.
Until they came for me, Destiny, because I, as you said, made fun of a second wave feminist or something, whatever her deal was. The one that was very upset that racism was ended by a Mortal Kombat character in a fictional ending of a video game.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's I think
Yeah,
everyone's just a
Destiny-
bunch of babies, really, realistically speaking.
Destiny, you made a good point about this. You said that you used to make the argument of like it doesn't, like, who cares? It doesn't really matter who the like main characters are in video games or whatever. That doesn't mean anything. But then as soon as they started putting like non-white male characters, all the other people who made that argument suddenly flipped and were like, whoa, why are you changing it? And you were like, that's when you realized.
I realized I was a useful idiot. Yeah.
Yes, because you were like, I know, because I was making the same argument of like, it doesn't matter, so why not have a black lead or whatever? And I thought that was a really good point because it just lays really plain their hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me feel like a moron. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like, it's not, I don't think that's your fault. And I also think, and I'm still like this on the free speech issue. I know you might have some disagreements with me on this issue, but my whole thing is that I've always like
What's up, Hasan?
outflanked
I know you're reading
the
that
right wingers on that issue where it's like they think they're pro free speech, but my whole thing was like, no, you're actually not pro free speech. If you look at Donald Trump, who you guys supported vehemently, this is a guy who sued Bill Maher over a joke he made that he didn't like. This is a guy who keeps threatening to quote.
Talks about expanding libel. Yeah, it's stupid. I don't know. People are fucking, dude. Oh god, conservatives that support Donald Trump and then want to say free speech are so stupid. Like watching them like try to like maneuver those conversations is fucking embarrassing. I feel bad for the person. Like, ugh.
Yeah,
Don't feel bad. They have no morality.
I think that changes if, to the extent that there were any people who actually cared about that issue and believed in that issue. When we lay out that case, I do think it changes some minds.
For you, bro.
And I also think that, your debates, particularly on the issue of race, have definitely changed minds. And I think that you're actually a good case study for what I've argued
like
for all
a
along, which
portrait?
is it's better to
This is weird
engage
for
even
him,
with these insane people
for Destiny.
because all it takes is one instance of popping that bubble where they think they're all so right
I think
about
that's
everything.
his girlfriend
And then
from
somebody
New
who makes a
Zealand.
cogent
I could
case
be
on the
wrong,
other
it's
side,
difficult to see
it
from
gives
this
them pause and you
perspective.
plant a
There's
seed.
not enough
And it always takes a
screen.
while. Like, I feel like a lot of people have a naive view about deconverting people on the right, and they think like, if it doesn't happen immediately, what's the point? And it's like, no, you could have a situation where you planted some seeds, and then next thing you know, they might go from watching one Destiny video to 12 Destiny videos. Then they start watching some Haas videos. The next thing you know, all of a sudden, they're on to ContraPoints. They're on to David Pakman, Kyle Kulinski, Jimmy Dore, and you just kind of slowly open up that door. But they wouldn't have even known that this world existed unless you went into the Lion's Den in the first place.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, as long as you do it in a responsible way, not like in a Dave Rubin way or a Tim Pool way. I guess I don't know where you stand on him. Yeah.
Well, I think that's really important too. Like having a conversation with someone is one thing,
to give some
or,
context.
like having a debate with someone is one thing.
Dave Rubin
especially
used to
if
work
you,
for TYT.
Try to get to the bottom of what they believe in, and don't just sit there and agree with them.
Move
like a fool,
to the right wing or like the centrist
what
position.
Dave Rubin does a lot, and I think that's because he's a dishonest actor, and I think we all know that at this point, right? I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, that's what I was actually just about to say. That I actually really dislike assuming bad intent in people, but Dave Rubin is one character who I'm totally comfortable saying like.
Right. So Dave Rubin is a gay anti-conservative. Like he's a skeptic, basically. He's like the guy that is open to all ideas, but he leans in a particular direction, which Hasan basically has implied that it's based on monetary gain. And based on like, the whole process that I've seen on the internet, it seems to be backed by actuality. Where there's been other actors, for example, Jimmy Dore, which they've mentioned now, who have left TYT. I don't know if he was fired or if it was like kind of like an indifferent thing, but him specifically, he's left and then he's kind of gone to this like quote unquote centrist position, and then he's pitched people like anyway, right wing actors. But yeah, I'm too
I
drunk
don't
for
know
this
if he was
shit.
trying to troll or what, but he was starting to tweet some things that really made me think. Where I was like, "Wait, is this actually like the Sargon pivot to the alt right?" Because some of the stuff that he was tweeting, I think it was like in relation to like trans people, and I think maybe the Jewish question. I think he tweeted a couple things. I wish I could remember the tweets exactly.
Sargon
But
of
yeah,
Assad
when
has
I started
appeared
to
with
read those, I was
Destiny
like,
and
"Oh
with
shit, I think
Hasan
Sargon is like heading for the
on
worst."
Trainwreck
So I do agree that
TV.
it seems like he's
Um,
probably moved a little bit more right.
you know, a
but
number
he just got
of
banned off
different
Twitter again, so
debates,
I'm
and
not- haven't kept
he's
up with
kind
that.
of he's more of a
And you know, it's
centrist
crazy because
in like this
Sargon
whole
and
perspective
Dave
of
Rubin
everything.
and a few others,
I would say
their
he's
numbers
more
on YouTube,
right
their
of
subscriber numbers
Dave
shot
Rubin
through
for
the
sure.
roof during the Trump era, like right when Trump got elected and all the way up through until now.
But the big
like,
story
it was
recently,
like,
at
I was
least,
looking at
is
that and I
that
was thinking to
Sargon
myself,
of
like,
Assad
that's
has
it's
been
like a
banned from
temporary,
Twitter.
you know,
He's
injection
spoken
of
out against
support that's gonna peter
MPs,
out,
and
especially
you know
for a guy like
some of the
Rubin,
stuff that
because I
he
don't think
pitches.
he means a
I
word of what he
understand where he's
says,
coming
and
from,
you can only
but
fool people for so long, because the more he talks, the more he's going to contradict himself, the more he's going to show himself to be silly and not actually interested in the issues. So I
Well, and even the more
guys,
uncomfortable you'll get with your own
he's an
fan
idea
base,
guy.
like you see.
he's an idea guy.
Okay, he likes ideas.
I just love ideas.
Chill, guys.
I
That's what
love
he wants.
ideas.
He just wants ideas. Like
I love
technology.
ideas too.
He has one response to every time he gets cornered. That's his one response. Is like, me, bro. I just care about these ideas.
Have you guys seen the Sky News video at this point, where like the guy kind of keeps subtly dunking on him by showing like they
Yeah,
show
I saw
Anna
it.
Kasparian
Thank you,
footage,
Hasan. Really
Yes.
fucking awesome video.
and then
Yeah,
his
and
like
then he becomes a
cartoon
human
stuff.
cartoon of himself.
Yeah, even his fans dunk on him quite frequently, which is hilarious. But not in a way where like my fans or Destiny's fans shit on me.
Maybe he's just a
like,
nihilist and just doesn't give a
he
fuck about
genuinely is
anything.
not respected, even in the
He's just
right,
like,
even in
all right,
right-wing
well,
circles.
I'll agree with whatever the
And yet
fuck
he
you
still
say.
tries to maintain this illusion
And
that
maybe
he
that'll
himself
be an
is anything but
entertaining
a,
stream, huh?
cookie cutter conservative at this point. And
Because he's a Weasley prick, man. He's so Weasley. Like, he doesn't even answer the questions and ask me any things. Like, anyone he doesn't like, he'll...
Wait, what?
True.
I need to get Kyle Kulinski's stream. I wish I had it.
The other thing about Dave
he's
Rubin
not live
is that
streaming
the,
right now,
Colette
so
article,
unfortunately I
I don't know if you guys
can't
are
get the
familiar with
actual
Colette, but it's
perspective
like,
on what the fuck's going on.
I would say it's like the magazine for the magazine if you are a white academic who greatly enjoys like how beautiful the Nazi uniforms were, or if you want to talk about the different phenotypes and haplogroups, like that's the intellectual racists magazine, the IDW's favorite magazine, and they wrote an article that was rather like rather moderate. I didn't even think it was like egregious at all, where they called Dave Rubin a conservative, and he lost his shit all over Twitter for like multiple days. He was like, "You're disparaging me. It's really silly that you're doing this."
See, the problem is most people present conservatism as like far right wing, but if you call yourself a centrist, comparably to like what the current political stance is, you're right wing.
Okay. And that even Joe Rogan dunked
So
on him.
calling you
It's always
conservative
funny to
if
listen
you're
to people that
a
call themselves
middleman
libertarians
is
ask me,
accurate.
"Oh, how do you feel about open borders?" And like, "Oh, I'm way against that." I was like, "Oh, interesting. So you're a libertarian. What does that mean exactly?"
How is that any different than like a conservative?
Stefan Molyneux.
Libertarian is not fucking conservative naturally. Like they're two different spectrums.
Pro-Trump, like
You believe in like the freedom of the individual. Well, that could be a liberal or that could be a conservative ideal.
But the funny thing about Rubin is that he's literally threatened to sue people for libel for calling him a conservative. And this is the same guy who spends like every other show yelping about free speech. And then
You
he
know what it
threatens
is?
to sue for libel.
Do you know what he's doing? The funny part is he's virtue signaling. They just don't want to be called conservatives.
Right.
So they literally like super pretend that they're not to virtue signal that they're like Democrats or liberals.
They
or not.
probably
I don't
don't.
know.
He
It's
doesn't
really
even
fucking
know
weird, but, like,
that
that's what
he's
it is.
right wing.
Why not just be honest? Like, just be honest.
Because
about
you
what
have to
are.
develop that
I don't
center
understand the
before
whole
you
silly
actually
tap dance that they're doing. I mean, I guess it's
state
lucrative. So
that
there's
somebody is
one
right
reason,
of
but
center
it
or
always
left
struck
of
me as like, I
center.
don't understand why you wouldn't just wear the badge. Just say you're conservative. What's the big deal?
It's not as profitable. These people are
Mhm.
very comfortable. They exist in the same circles with like the Bill Maher's of the world and whatnot. They wanna also keep making money, but also have the glamour of being a part of the elite and hang with the Hollywood socialites and whatnot. So
being a right-wing elite is not illustrious as being a left-wing elite.
And that you just happen
Let's
to
get
always
that
agree
straight.
with conservatives and conservative policies. And that way, and as Dennis Prager correctly pointed this out directly to Dave Rubin's face when they were doing a fireplace chat, he is a useful puppet for the right. Dave Rubin is more useful as a centrist or, as a liberal even, than he would be if he was a conservative, because he's not very intelligent. So
Yeah,
once
and
you become a conservative, once you're tarnished that way, what is he going to do?
It's always frustrating for me too, and it works because like when I have to debate like people that are like alt-righters and shit, it always looks like I'm the extremist because I always have to run through like 50 dumb fuck centrists first before I'm like, hey, this is like some fucking alt-right shit. And they're like, well, hold on, is it really that all-right to just talk about the fact that maybe black people have the warrior gene? Like, yeah, it kind of is. And they're like, well, I don't know. And now I look like an extreme leftist because I have to run through all these people that call themselves centrists who are like unironically like defending people. Yeah, it's really frustrating for me.
Yeah,
your life is so hard,
has always been super weird to me because
So
I
hard.
never like for somebody to even start
Hot
going
chicks
down
from
that
fucking
path
New Zealand.
is such a foreign thought to me. But I mean, I
Not gay, but I don't
what
believe
would lead
that she's
somebody
at
down
the
that
same
path?
level that
Because
you.
the original thing that always pops in my mind is, honestly, it's like an old school Marxist type argument, which is it's super easy for the ruling class to basically do divide and conquer by getting middle class white people to blame middle class and poor black and brown people for their problems. And so while they fight amongst themselves, the owner class runs out the back door with all the money.
Yeah, it's literally like you live down the street from like an Amazon warehouse and you're making like $40K a year as some broke as fuck family. And like Amazon paid no taxes last year and like they're billions of dollars. And you're like, that fucking Mexican over there that might be using an EBT card, that motherfucker is taking all my money. It's like, what the fuck? It's so fucking crazy hilarious to me that a whole bunch of poor people will point fingers amongst themselves while the wealthiest people are getting like so absurdly wealthy. It's like, don't you guys think like this is really stupid? Yeah. Ugh.
90 to 1 comparison.
Like, that's always
Fuck
what
out of
struck me
here.
about it is that it seems
Don't be
like
stupid.
a masterful move.
I
from
talked to
the
my
owner
parents the
class
other day.
to
I was
just
like,
get away with
who are you
everything.
gonna vote for?
Yeah.
Joe Biden.
There
We
is
gotta get
actual-
Trump on.
There is like literal
What the fuck?
historical basis to what you're talking
I'm
about.
pretty sure I changed their
I
mind.
believe in the Reconstruction era when before Jim Crow laws were implemented in the South, black people actually were.
But people are stupid.
Alongside, white
an
workers
amazingly
that were
small
also
bladder.
I think it was called Purple Party. I don't want to misrepresent this right now and pull this out of my ass, but they literally instilled racial anxiety or racial animosity within the white working class. Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about this too. The concept known as "at least I'm not an N-word." Like that's the that's always been at the heart of like racial anxiety that white people feel in this country, so that they never look up. They constantly look down and they constantly punch down, because if they were to mobilize together and realize that we are all allies in this, that we all have had a shitty hand dealt to us by virtue of not being born into a baron's family, basically, that we should be allies. We should be fighting against this organization, the way that people have organized our economy. It is truly unfair.
And I think it's always been a weird contradiction to me that you have conservative types. Very often, they love to bring up the idea of individualism. And it's all about like, hey, I'm all about personal freedom and I'm all about personal responsibility, and forget the collective because that's like
But we're talking about the
nonsense.
collective
Let's talk
and
about
like
the individual. And then in the next
stating
breath,
stats.
they'll start talking,
Yeah.
collectivism when it comes to race, and they start talking about group
Exactly.
differences. And
It's like, oh my god! And the people that will do this, like I feel like even Stefan Malin do this. In one breath, he'll be like, identity politics is the cancer rotting our political discourse, and then in the next breath, look at the beauty of Poland's white culture. Like, wait, what the fuck is it? Like, what do you want? Do you want to talk about identity politics or not?
Well, again, Stefan Molyneux literally started off as you guys.
Why are those two pronouncing his name
by presenting
differently?
himself?
Which one is it?
Yeah,
please fill me in.
A libertarian
I should
philosopher, misrepresenting his
open
position
up
on
Google
both of
Fast.
those accounts because he's not a philosopher.
Thanks, sir.
I think he was like,
Yeah.
I think it was at some point working in like childcare or something, which is genuinely a horrific
Nobody?
thought to
Seriously?
even, consider. That man was like near children, but you know, I remember a very famous debate that he had with Kokesh, who is somewhat of a libertarian, where they were talking about the virtues of borders, and Kokesh obviously was on the other side, but he still like somewhat ended up agreeing with Malny Meme's support of Donald Trump, and his reasoning,
he even
justification
changed the
for why
name
borders were a
in between
necessity is
sentences.
truly abhorrent, and that is because, you know, IQ differences amongst races, and that we should be making sure that the American gene pool is as clear of that problem as possible, because IQ leads to a higher likelihood of committing crime, like lower IQ.
What a piece of garbage. There are videos of Stefan Malik years back.
See,
when he was
this is the problem that I have with Hasan.
Who believe in borders are almost by definition racist, and he's done a total 180.
This is not interesting.
Well, that's because
It's
he
like
actually was like a
restating
libertarian,
Yeah, but you know,
points of
even
the other
those people,
person
like, don't get me
over
wrong,
and over.
libertarians, there
And
is
the
common
first
ground
person
with
restates their
leftism,
point like
libertarianism
2
in, like,
times.
foreign policy
On the
issues,
second
for
one
example,
reassures
drug
the
war
first
issues.
person
But even those like
that
Ayn
you're
Rand
cool with
types, I just
saying what
always
you're saying.
felt like
And then the third person
you think
says,
you're a genius. You read
second
like
person,
2 books.
you're cool with.
You read two Ayn Rand. You read like
It's
Atlas
uninteresting.
Shrugged, and then what's the other big one?
I'd much more love to
too.
see
It's not even
like
like
Destiny debates.
I mean, it doesn't have a
I
lot of
mean,
theory.
some
It's
of
like
them
a
are
cool
fucked,
guy
and I understand
who
like
also happens to be
the perception
self-described
that
libertarian, like sick.
This is like
Destiny is an
perfect world.
awesome
This is what my
debate, but some
ideology would look like with fictional
viewpoints
characters, pretty much, yeah. Or Ayn Rand, Atlas
just because you
Shrugged,
don't throw
the
it.
other big one, fuck.
There's like no emotion in the.
I went through like a little bit of a
It's
libertarian
perfectly
phase at one
valid
point,
arguments,
if you don't get out of
but
that at some point. I mean, it's one of those things
there's
where
no like.
it's just like weird college.
You look at
conservatism,
a
like,
statistic
what
and
if
you
selfishness
take
is
it at
actually
face
good,
value.
bro? Have you thought about
You say,
that?
okay, well,
Maybe taxes
this
are
statistic
like,
means that this
yeah.
thing is right.
Yeah,
Or this
you
thing
know,
is wrong.
taxation is theft, even though you
But you
get
don't
something
look at the
back
other
for it,
things.
but,
It draws
of
very
course, profit,
similar
what to do with the profit,
parallels
what to do with your own
to
surplus
the way
value
that
you
Destiny
generated for your
debates it.
capital owners. That to me, that's not theft at all. That's just normal. That's something I truly don't understand.
I think Chomsky makes great points about this when he says,
Chomsky.
and this kind of
Love that dude.
my
First email I ever sent to him, he replied back. And
He
that's
said, we're supposed to be like a representative democracy, but then where you spend most of your time at you know, your job, it's basically a little tyranny, because you have the boss, you have somebody above you who can basically call all the shots. So that's a giant contradiction in our system.
So Kyle, you have that perspective, but you yourself wouldn't consider yourself a democratic socialist, right? Or are you, if I'm not mistaken? I think you're also a social democrat, right?
Yeah, I'm more of a social democrat than anything else, but there are little elements of post-capitalist philosophy in my ideology, but I'm not fully post-capitalist.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Why?
Well, sure. So for me, it's all about the tiny element of post-capitalism in my philosophy is very simple. It's worker-owned co-ops. So I'm totally in favor of worker-owned co-ops. I think that, and the Labour Party in the UK, to their credit, has spoken about this in terms of like laying out policies that incentivize worker-owned co-ops. And I think that's totally fine, and I'm totally in favor of that. But I also think that there actually are plenty of examples, and I know because I personally was one, of people who, it's not, I wouldn't mandate every business by law has to be a worker-owned co-op, but I'm okay with worker-owned co-ops existing, if that makes sense. Because there are people who just kind of want to show up, clock in, clock out, and then go about their business. So I don't think hierarchy is bad by definition. I just think that it can be bad in certain circumstances, and we should obviously ameliorate the ills that come about as a result of the current state of capitalism that we have right now.
Yeah,
wow, man,
especially because like currently that distinction robs people of political agency, right? Like not having access to wealth or not having any control or any autonomy over your own life in the workforce significantly, I think, contributes to a lack of motivation to join political discourse in a meaningful way, or even activism in a meaningful way. And I think that's part of the reason why when labor
I bring it to the people.
in this country,
like my fucking birthday
there was a lot more.
I went
the
out and got
Democratic Party's
drunk, but I
hand
talked
was essentially
politics.
forced to
I met a
work
dude
with those
that
unions
believed
and
that,
actually present,
and I guess I haven't
like,
fact checked him,
protective
but he
legislation
brought up the
for
fact
American
that
workers.
the
And that's
fact
completely gone. It's
that
obliterated.
in the 1940s more people were willing to fight for the Nazi Party than were willing to fight in the U.S. In the U.S., we're willing to fight for the Nazi Party as opposed to the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, but just like you mentioned,
whatever it
like,
may be.
anarcho-
And I said to him, okay, can you cite this, the study? Or is this some, and I'm thinking under my breath, or is this some bullshit that, you know, has been propagated by the alt-right?
Within Marxist principles, it's all about changing
couldn't cite
the
it.
current.
They're willing to
the
say it,
current
but they aren't
asymmetry
willing to
of power
back it with
between
any
those
sort
who
of
have and those who have
statistics.
not,
And I
or
said
the
to him,
owner
okay,
class
well,
and the worker class.
what if
Like,
this was some bumfuck
That's correct, but I also think
census that was done by people only in the absolute south, only in like the most degraded portion of the United States? He didn't have a response for it. If you can't cite your studies, then you're not entitled to.
I don't know. That's why that's why I have a hard time considering myself like any specific form of a Marxist or whatever. Whenever people try to like figure out what I am, or they ask me and they're like, "What are you, a tanky?" Like what progressive voice?
The fuck is a
calls me all the
tanky?
time. It's just I do understand a need for centralized planning to some degree, especially not in like a USSR sense, but centralized planning with incentives. And even subsidies in a similar
Destiny
fashion
is
to what we
more-
have currently, because even if we
more
were to force
interested
every
in
single
his
cooperative,
anno
every single
1800.
corporation to become a cooperative, it would still be susceptible to market forces, and therefore competition would end up depressing wages, especially if workers were to democratically decide on exploiting other nations or even themselves to some degree in order to remain competitive. And then there would still be that inappropriate dynamic. Whereas I feel like production is supposed to focus on necessity and even, even abundance to some respect, or even luxury goods. I am also a luxurious boy. I like my luxury items. So I don't know.
Speaking of his fucking,
well, I think that's where, like, that's the role,
his
that's
gig.
where statism comes in a little bit. Because, you know, they're like anti-state forms of leftism, and
His
then there's
gigs.
statist forms of leftism. Because if you look at, like, you know, the Scandinavian system, basically what they've done is they've taken certain things off the table and then made it so that, like, outside of that, we can have competition and an economy that's somewhat based on that. So in other words, you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about healthcare's off the table, education's off the table, including higher education. You get a certain amount of guaranteed leisure time per year. So it's like, once you take the basics
Italy?
off of the table, I actually think it's totally fine to have
Greece?
some level of competition and market forces kind of dictate where your system goes, because I actually do kind of buy into the argument that there is something in human nature that you can't ignore, and you can't just like wash away by wishing that human beings were like purely good and purely altruistic. I think we have to work with both the altruistic side of human nature and then also kind of harness the competitive side to positive ends.
Wait, have you ever read like Zizek's stuff on like a necessity for the state and how too much democracy can be
I just got done with
like rather overbearing, for example?
Was it
and that there
Zizek versus Peterson?
Stuff on the 2016 election, though, I saw that.
And it seemed like Peterson kind of like just gave up to him in a way.
Is the real problem, because that form of compromise has allowed someone like Donald Trump to become so powerful. That stuff we all agree on. I'm just more interested in like the theory element, because you said human nature, and I somewhat agree with you. I think we're selfish beings, and in order to combat that, we need to have like maybe
the
not
only
enough
driving
structure,
force
but
behind
a
it.
democratically elected structure that still takes care of all of the boring things that we don't want to take care of. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a fan of like a constitutional democracy. I think having a constitution is super important, because that's where you can kind of lay out those things that are off the table, both things that are negative rights, but also things that are positive rights. And obviously, I think European nations.
So Kyle, you're talking about this, but you're also justifying.
Of that when you look at the
or I
US
think,
Constitution
justifying
about
laws
hey,
that
here are
would
things
be
the
against
government
free
can't do.
speech.
Like the government can't lock you up for saying stuff that's political or whatever.
Maybe
I
not.
forgot where I was
Wait,
going with
hold on.
that.
Maybe
Someone
that's
said
not your
call
position.
Hasan out on something.
What's that?
Oh, Zach said he would vote for Trump over Hillary. Is that
He did,
true?
yeah.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
no, I don't agree with
Uh-huh.
that. That's true.
Okay.
He did say that, and then he said, "Oh, just kidding." After too, but you know, it's still a bullshit take to have.
He had what I call the bad.
I think he's a
theory,
bitch
which
for
is
doing
that
that.
if Trump gets elected, it will get so immensely bad.
Somebody
that
who
the
is
left will
so
rise
thoughtful
quickly,
and is so
that
precise in their
collective
conversation
chief will then
shouldn't back down.
implement many more
Especially some.
positive, radical reforms.
I mean, he's
because
what
of the
from
backlash
the
from
Czech,
Trump. Now, having said that, I
but
think that
so
all
he
the
doesn't really
empirical
have any
evidence that we
perspective
have
on
proves
like
that he's wrong.
U.S.
Because
relations
take
and
the
like
Bush years, for
the
example.
whole.
George
There we
W.
go.
Bush
Much better.
is a war criminal. He was, you know, a deregulator and a trickle down.
But if you're willing
guy,
to say
and
that,
he was
you
wrong
can't
about
back up.
virtually everything. But the reaction from the Democrats was not, oh, now we're going to go even further left and we're going to drag the spectrum back to where it should be and we're going to implement all these awesome policies. The reaction from the Democrats was, now let's meet Bush halfway and go further to the right. So I think that he's a little naive for thinking that that would be the dynamic at play. If anything, when we see far-right figures in the U.S. get elected, they do nothing but move the Overton window even
Trump is
further
not
to the
far
right,
right.
which of course is detrimental.
Yeah. But part of
Trump
that
is
is
not
also
far
because we
Trump is
haven't
not
had
far
before,
right.
like pre-Bernie Sanders, the American left was almost completely divorced from any sort of socialist pressure, any sort of trade unionist pressure, like any sort of true leftist pressure. And I think that's why it is a necessity to have even somewhat more radical elements within the left have a voice at the table in order to reshift the Overton window back to a reasonable place. And as a consequence
Overton
of that,
window,
bring
it's
about
basically
positive legislation that
the
will
idea
genuinely,
that if somebody steps
even if
out
it's
of this, like,
marginally,
format
genuinely
where
improve
if you call
the
somebody an
material
N-word,
conditions of
for
working class
example, as a
Americans and the
political
lives of working class
person.
Americans. So
That's
that's why
outside
I
of the
that's why
Overton window. So
I don't
where's-
have like a
where's the,
anti-tanky stance that Destiny
where's
has.
the bill?
I mean,
What's-
obviously I
what's
don't
the
engage in like
outside scope?
genocide denial or anything like that. There is definitely a line I draw at like historical revisionism and things of that nature, but. If there's like a Marxist-Leninist perspective, I definitely do
Like
agree.
the Armenian
It should be heard.
genocide, my
I see it
friend?
as like, and this is in no way comparable morally, but similar to the Tea Party. People are always like, "Well, Bernie Sanders like the Tea Party. The Bernie Bros like the Tea Party of the left." Okay, look at how fucking successful the Tea Party was. Now, of
That's
course,
right.
there are different conditions, like. The Tea Party was not the Tea Party was not posing any sort of serious threat to the status quo. The Tea Party was also half astroturfed with Koch brother funding and financing. It also capitalized on a lot of racial resentment that is much stronger in this country than any sort of class consciousness ever was. So those were the advantages of the Tea Party. But no one can sit here and actually claim that the Tea Party, which essentially created a freedom caucus in the House that even forces Trump's hand to go further right at times, is not successful. And Trump, in many ways, took advantage of the Tea Party messaging, and I would even go so far as to say he's the Tea Party president.
Yeah, I think that's all true, and I totally agree with the point of
In a
like
way,
having
I've
people
gotta
to the
pee.
left
Too
of
much
you being involved in public life and even running for office. I've said it on my show before. I would vote for somebody who's significantly to the left of me because just because those are their beliefs and their ideas does not mean they're going to get the whole canon of their policy platform implemented. In fact, quite the opposite. You're only going to get a very tiny percentage of that implemented. So I'll just give one example now. Like the UK healthcare system, according to some studies, is the best healthcare system in the world. And they are like fully socialized medicine in the sense that you have taxpayer money, so public funds going to public hospitals and public institutions. So there's like no private ownership of that stuff. So that's the fully socialized system. Now, I would support that, and then the compromise position from that, once you go through the dirty process of actually governing and legislating, the dirty compromise from that is, well, let's do a Medicare for all system where you have public funds going to private hospitals and private clinics and private, healthcare facilities. And I think that that's the benefit of having people to your left in the conversation and to your left fighting for those goals.
Would you kill all
you could,
privatization
you could shoot for
of
the
public
stars
funds?
and maybe you'll get to the moon. So that's the whole philosophy of this is just going to happen when it comes to governing and legislating, that you almost have to go further. And that was always one of many problems with Obama, is that he started the conversation by saying, let's do a public option. And then, well, no, that should have been like the last ditch compromise effort. You started with let's do a public option, and you ended up with let's do the Heritage Foundation's healthcare plan that was originally, Mitt Romney's and Chuck Grassley's and Newt Gingrich's healthcare plan. And, the results were not great. Obviously, any reform further to the left would have been preferable. So this is a lesson that Democrats haven't learned, but I think they haven't learned on purpose, because they're also, funded by Wall Street, funded by military industrial complex, funded by pharmaceutical industry. And it's a shame, because look how popular. All it took was like one election cycle, and we saw how popular real lefties can be. Like when you look at Ro Khanna and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar, they're some of the most known, and they have more like social media following than anybody, because they're actually fighting for things that are popular. And look at how much support you can get when you do that. And of course, you get the ire of the right, and they strawman you 24/7 when you get to that point.
But who gives a shit? That's fucking great, dude. That is awesome. That's always good, because remember, I mean, I know you covered this as well, when they were like originally vilifying AOC and saying like, oh my God, look at her, she's a socialist, look at her plan, and they would bring up her agenda, and it was like, make sure we take care of the elderly.
Oh, that Fox News picture! Holy shit! Yeah.
Fucking, it
was like living wage. Healthcare for all. It was like so. Oh my God, free college education. Yeah, holy shit.
It was an ad, man. It was great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's truly great. Obviously, the left still has a lot to overcome. The left has to fucking first fight off the Democratic Party. This is something that I know you and I will have a kick out of talking about, like the DCCC's blacklist. How do you feel about that as someone who is one of the founders of Justice?
You guys can see it.
How does that make you feel? Because it boils my fucking blood, dude.
These guys
Wait, can you explain this? What are you talking about?
Destiny is like
the DCCC blacklist.
So the DCCC came out, I believe, a couple months back, and this was right around the time when Nancy Pelosi was like wilding out a little bit and saying certain things. Like,
it just says something about his like.
It's starting to criticize, like starting to be very vocal about, or starting to be very dismissive about AOC and the policies that they were pushing for. Just like Kyle mentioned, very popular policies. And after that, the DCCC secretly, and I think the Intercept first reported on this, secretly came out with a memo stating that any consultant or any staffer that works with any Democratic opposition that is interested in primarying incumbent Democrats is going to be blacklisted, and that they won't be able to work in these establishment institutions any longer.
So in other words, half the time, out of one side of their mouth, they scream about unity nonstop. We got to unify. We got to be Republicans. We got to be Donald Trump. Unity, unity, unity. And then they turn around and say, oh yeah, anybody who's on the left flank, we're excommunicating you, and you have to be an establishment figure in order to get any support from us. And then they
unity
also
just
say
means
the next
agree with me, right? That's what they mean when they say unity.
Also primary Ilhan Omar, who just won. So it's like, wait, you said primaries are bad and you like unity, but now you want to primary somebody. And the whole point was primary her from the right. So in other words, listen, it's asymmetrical warfare. And Haas, that's the thing, is that for me, this wasn't I told you so moment to everybody in the movement, because I feel like even though they have the best of intentions, many of them are super naive. And they felt like, well, no, once we get in there and, we can get Pelosi to come around on certain issues. And I was super clear from the beginning, she is not your friend. She's your enemy. She's going to gaslight you every step of the way. She's going to tell you, oh, yeah, totally. I support what you're doing in theory. But no. When it comes to the nitty gritty of actually legislating this stuff, like take a back seat and sit down and I'll take care of it. And then, of course, she's going to stab you in the back at every step of the way. So my whole point was, and again, this is a lesson that has to be learned, and it's a principle that needs to be abided by. I don't even care if you're on the left and I look at your policy platform and you're right about everything and I agree with you on all of your policy positions. That's maybe not even half the battle, because really the more important thing is, do you have any idea how to go about getting that implemented? And especially for a president, if you think about this for a president, like all of the presidential candidates on the Democratic side who are on the side of, and Elizabeth Warren's a great example of this. I like a lot of her platform, but her whole thing is like, well, listen, I mean, we can, like, all the Democrats generally want to end up in the same place when it comes to healthcare. So why not work together and compromise and get it done? And it's like, well, first of all, no, the Democrats are not all on the right side. And no, compromising and holding hands and singing Kumbaya and trying to get in a time that is not normal. You cannot use normal procedures to go about getting this done. So you have to be on the side of, I'm going to twist arms, I'm going to play politics, and I'm going to have an attitude of, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'm coming after you. And you know who did this really well? FDR. You know who else actually did this really well when he wanted to? Lyndon B. Johnson.
Okay, but for the record, if we're going to talk about FDR, again, the conditions were very different. But more importantly, this is something that often does not get mentioned. FDR had tremendous amounts of pressure from trade unions and also the Communist Party and socialists that were way more effective and had actual influence in governance at that time. So they were like, hey, you have two options here. You either fuck this entire thing up and there is a violent revolution and America becomes communist in the way that we want it to be, or you implement some social democratic reforms and you actually force the wealthy to pay their fair share.
So Haas, you're making my point for me. That's exactly what I was going to say next, which is, and Bernie's indicated that he kind of gets this in a way that I don't think the other candidates get. He's saying like, no, like even if I'm elected, I'm still going to need all of you, and you have to be involved, and you have to be ready to march if necessary, pick up the phone and make,
you're not going to be able to drive
and go
these
after it.
policies.
And also, I think he knows that, again, something Obama did not know at all. If somebody in the Democratic caucus is not going to support your legislation, in this instance, let's say Medicare for all, here's how you handle it. You call them into your office, you sit them down, and you say, here's the deal. If you vote for this piece of legislation, you have my support. I'm president. I just got elected. My approval rating is way higher than yours. Congress's approval rating is what, 19%? Your approval rating is what, 20 some odd percent, 30 some odd percent, if you're lucky? Okay, well, here's the deal. I'm more popular than you. I will come to your state and I will campaign against you for a primary challenger if you vote against my legislation. If you vote for my legislation, Medicare for all, and if you play ball, well, then it's all fine and dandy. I'll make sure I support you the next time around. So you make a decision. Your political career will be over if you vote against Medicare for all. That's what you're faced with right this second. So you make that decision.
I don't necessarily
and you have to scare these people, man. You have to play politics. You have to get dirty to get it done. You have to wheel and deal. You have to apply political pressure. And I feel like so many of the candidates on the Democratic side, even the ones that mean well, like Elizabeth Warren, she's ultimately super naive about how to actually get stuff accomplished.
You know, Trump perceivably was like
you're
the devil.
Absolutely correct. I forget who pointed this out earlier, but
maybe Bernie didn't actually
I was listening.
He was the devil incarnate,
to a podcast,
which was
and
the same email that I received.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. Someone was saying that Barack Obama and his his campaigning was about, all right, I'm gonna get elected into office, and then you guys give me the keys to the castle, and then we're safe. Right? Everything is good going at, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to bring America together. There's no red America or blue America. It's a purple America, all that fun stuff. And, we're going to figure it out together by deliberation and by compromising with the other side. And you guys don't need to do anything. Whereas Bernie, on the other hand, understands, and this is something that I truly love about Bernie Sanders. It's like, this is not about me. This is a much larger movement that is much larger than myself. And our work begins the moment I step into the office. And this is something that I try to tell people all the time in my chat as well. It doesn't stop when Bernie Sanders is president. That's actually when everything begins. There is going to be a need for direct action and mobilization and activism to push the Democratic establishment at every step of the way once Bernie Sanders is president. It doesn't stop.
Yeah, that's all true. I totally agree with all that.
Yeah, what do you think, Destiny? I know electoralism bores you a little bit, but this is definitely one of the things that I truly appreciate about Kyle is the amount of work he puts into electoral politics, which is something that a lot of leftists scoff at and think is unnecessary. And I think that's not only incredibly counterproductive, but I mean, I think that's just a terrible, terrible way of looking at it. Just like throwing away elections by saying, hey, all manner of politics is only going to benefit the interests of the upper crust, and it doesn't matter. It's better to just sit it out and wait for a revolution to come is just so silly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you at all, of course. Yeah.
Anyway, what do you want to talk about, Destiny? I feel like we're filibustering here a little bit. I'm filibustering a little bit.
Yeah, people are definitely going to be pissed at me and Haas because you've said next to nothing, Destiny.
I'm just listening. I'm just hanging out, man.
Here's the thing. They know that he's playing Anno 1880 right now.
I'm listening to you guys talk. I'm not even focusing.
They know
on the
that.
game. It's
His
just
fan base already knows that, but it doesn't matter. They become such irrational babies sometimes that they're still going to shit on both of us. Mostly me, though. Don't worry.
Let's talk about something where we might disagree. We might have some disagreements. We could either do, what do you want, political violence or trade?
Yeah, I don't care either one. People say that we disagree a lot on protectionism, and then like deplatforming people or protectionism.
We gotta play some shit.
Or I'm sorry, deplatforming people are like
nobody talks about like trade. I feel like deplatforming and free speech is a topic all the time, everywhere. So let's do something a little different. Let's do.
All right.
Okay, sure.
I'm actually,
what do we want?
Haas, I'm curious what you think about this. I'm curious whose side you're going to be more on, mine or Destiny.
I don't know, guys. I'm going to be on the side of the truth, okay? So here's my issue with protectionism. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Here's my issue with protectionism. Or like a trade in general. I'm the first to admit that I think like global capitalism is very difficult to unpack, and there are certain advantages to even like something like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but then significant disadvantages that made me come out against the TPP. So I don't have like a clear-cut and well-versed opinion on this. I'll be the first to admit that, but I'm willing to hear you guys out.
Destiny, would you say that you're Joe free trade full stop, or how would you describe
I'm a huge globalist. Basically, my understanding is that things are going to progress in a direction whether or not you want them to. So multilateral trade agreements, basically markets are going to be open all over the world. Basically what you can control is how much influence do you want to exert over these things and how much do you want to participate in them. You don't have a choice to shut them down, and you have to acknowledge the realities of these markets.
Okay, so my position is a little bit different than that. I would say that I believe in trade as a matter of necessity. So there's going to be plenty of things that we need in this country that we don't have here, produce here for whatever reason, and that it's just a fact of reality that requires trade, that requires getting along with other countries, that requires having some sort of agreements. I think all that stuff is unavoidable. But I think the reason why people would generally categorize me as protectionist and why I seem like I'm super protectionist when I talk about this is because it's just a stone cold fact of reality that the trade deals that we have in place right now are specifically crafted by for the owner class and corporate. And they do not care at all about these deals, and they craft them to not care about labor.
I love the juxtaposition that we have with this, like fucking all this against Destiny being like, oh yeah, I'm left with playing Anno or fucking.
And that's like, those are all decisions that are made. Corporations pay politicians for their campaigns for so long, and then when the politicians get elected, they look to do favors for the people that gave them their campaign money.
Go with your shit, Kyle. I love the like debate underlined by like fucking.
We want to bring the Chevy Blazer to Mexico because we're going to save a couple shiny pennies on that. Do you care? Can we shut down the Georgetown plant? Basically, the government has said because you're so bought and owned.
You just care about it.
We're supposed to represent people in Georgetown, the working people who've been living on whatever $20 an hour with healthcare and raise a family or whatever. We don't care. Uproot their lives, destroy the entire country, and outsource all the jobs. And then we'll turn around and make some sort of naturalistic argument, like, oh,
Yes,
this is
sir.
just the modern economy and we can't stop it. And no, you had a choice and you made the wrong choice, and you made the wrong choice because of corruption. And that's why it's so easy for a demagogue like Trump to step up, who's a fake populist, who doesn't mean a goddamn word of it, but he goes to the Rust Belt, the place where Hillary wouldn't step foot, and he goes on and on about how the TPP is terrible and the NAFTA is terrible, and I'm going to make sure your job's safe here and all that stuff. Now, every word of it was a lie, but there's a reason why he was able to win every single, Rust Belt state. And I think that what the Democrats need to do is embrace a sort of robust pro-union, pro-work strategy and political platform, and that will help.
Okay, there's a lot there. So, going to the first part, I understand what you're saying. In terms of
he actually
a lot of
paused the
free trade
game.
movements is in a way kind of get co-opted by large corporations. Like obviously, the
5,000 viewers. He paused the game.
But tossing out the idea of free trade because it's corrupted makes about as much sense as tossing out the idea of like having democratic elections because the citizens can vote, right? Like I agree with that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like I'm very much in favor of free trade. Obviously, I mean I don't think any of the three of us here are in favor of corporations writing legislation to benefit them over the average worker or multilateral industries. I don't think anybody here would be of that mind. So I mean like obviously the best of both worlds would be a way to write up these deals such that like the average American is represented as much as possible, but still being open to free trade. I don't see why that can't be a possibility.
Back to
I mean, I certainly like that better than what we have now. And I don't know, theoretically, I'm not sure we could even come up with anything that would be better than that. Like,
you bitch.
I wouldn't be against that. I'll say that. But in terms of like the way it works right now, it's almost comical, which is why you have such a populist anti-trade backlash. So
yeah, but I mean, like that could happen just as easily domestically as well, right? Like, so for instance, our ISPs are domestic bodies that collect a lot of our taxpayer money, do fuck all with it, and then fuck the consumers. That has nothing to do with free trade or global stuff. That's all kept domestically. I could just as easily imagine the exact same type of thing happening here, where maybe you get a domestic corporation like Walmart that's able to do all of its manufacturing and everything in the United States, and then because there are so many artificial restrictions to trade in that world. Let's say, for instance, Walmart sells clothes, but I think I can get people that can like do clothes better, but I need to import the material in order to do it. But Walmart does it locally, pays everybody shit, fucks everybody over. But because they're the ones that are engaging in the rent-seeking behavior of keeping trade like artificially locked in the country, now people can't compete with them, and now they fuck everybody over, and they use their position as like a big lobbyist in order to do that, right? Like I feel like we could just as easily envision as many ways that large companies could fuck us domestically in an anti-free trade way as we could, fucking us like internationally with free trade. That's what I feel like.
No, I totally agree with that, but the way we stop that is basically to end the private financing of elections and make it so that we have clean elections by law. Because then you wouldn't have as much sway. These corporations wouldn't have as much sway over the body politic as they do now. And another
for sure, I agree.
I think we both agree on the same points, though, that like currently protectionism, regardless of our position on protectionism, we understand that the system is inherently broken because it benefits the owners of corporations rather than the workers. But I don't agree with that. But I mean, you don't agree with that? You don't agree that like
really? I don't agree that capitalism is inherently broken, right? Otherwise, I'd be a socialist or whatever.
Okay.
You are.
Well, capitalism in the way that it creates.
I think Haas is saying the way the system currently works is broken, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I also don't think that. But I think that is a consequence of capitalism.
Oh,
like
is he
the class antagonism that's at the heart of it.
Kyle, cheers,
and that's
brother.
precisely why we were talking about like political agency and autonomy for the working class, and helping them engage in political action in a collective manner. But the thing that bothers me is like, I mean, look, I like globalism too, which is why I always have this issue. Like, I think we can have a more morally consistent, a better way of actually participating in global trade. But currently, the same forces that depress wages at the domestic level could be expanded upon global trade in a nearly identical fashion. Exploitation is still at the heart of all of the deals that we're executing, which then ultimately hurts the domestic labor force as well. Do you guys see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that's the core of why, I appear to be super protectionist when I have these conversations in the context of the U.S. is because that's at the heart of it. Like, it's exploitation is the heart of all these deals. That's why they're literally written in secret with like corporate overlords. In some instances, they don't even allow Congress to see it until it's like already done, which is crazy when you think about it. I mean, when you look at TPP, for example, under TPP, you were able to sue for loss of expected profits in the future.
So, okay, so hold on. I know a lot of people get really mad over stuff like this, but a lot of the provisions in the TPP, so specifically, a lot of people say governments are allowed to be sued by corporations.
Fire it up, brother.
People will complain about this, but on another hand, this was supposed to be one of the tools that we would give our companies to fight back against people like China. So, for instance, I believe one of the provisions of the TPP was you could sue any company or any other, like, any company's country that does business in a certain country. So if China put like a shitty company in Germany that was stealing your IP, you could sue China as a result of like a provision in the TPP. That a lot of those tools that seem like really fucked up, like people imagine like, oh, well, people are going to sue the government in order to pollute. I mean, I guess maybe that could be a thing, but in another breath, like it could also be used to fight things like the IP protection that China fucks with so much that we have so many problems with. It just gives us like another tool to fight stuff like that. Kind of like on the WTO.
Historically, every single lawsuit, every single famous lawsuit that has happened in international like corporate tribunals have always favored corporations and denied agency to like actual entire nations. Like it's awful. And
so wait. What do you?
Countries like China have a lot more power to fight back against it, but countries like Egypt do not. And even countries like France have had struggled with this, if I'm not mistaken. Like Australia had a famous case. Egypt had another famous case with, I think, pharmaceuticals. Australia's case was around cigarettes and like adding safety hazard patches onto cigarettes. Like there are numerous things where like the people could literally democratically elect to do something, and then corporations still have the power to go to a tribunal and
yes. Haas, let me explain this.
Have their demands be met.
Okay, I'm sure, Destiny, when you hear this, you're gonna change your opinion a little bit on this. So, under the TPP, there are these allegedly independent international tribunals
or whatever,
that are going to be set up. And under this system, what you do is you take sovereignty away from the countries and you put governments and corporations on equal footing. And so when there is some sort of a dispute like you were just describing, it will be ameliorated and adjudicated at these international tribunals. Now, the problem is, guess who gets to pick the international tribunal? The corporations. So, in other words, it's like arbitration. You know how for arbitration cases, oh, there's some sort of sexual assault in my company. Okay, well, instead of going to the justice system to figure this out, how about you go through this like sham fake trial I set up where I tell you it's no big deal, get over it. It's like that on an international scale with, workers' rights issues and pollution issues, which are definitely going to be the heart of it. I understand what you're saying about how China steals intellectual property, and that's a huge problem. I agree with you that that's a huge problem. But the way that these trade deals are crafted is more about hey, let corporations pollute nonstop. Hey, let's drive wages down more, have a race to the bottom and raise profits at the same time. So it's just there's no transparency, and the neoliberal world order has made it so that, people's lives are worse off, and we're just going further down that track with the way that these deals are crafted.
Fun fact that arbitration,
So wait. So
94% of the time, the outcome of those sorts of arbitrations go to the corporation itself. Not shocking, but
Wait, what's your... Okay, so somebody literally linked me this. On June 24th, 2015, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, released its World Investment Report 2015. Chapter 3 of the report provides some new and most interesting numbers on investor-state dispute settlement cases, who wins how many cases and when. Following the UNCTAD's traditional methodology, the total number of concluded cases is broken down between settled state wins and investor wins. Our arbitral decisions on jurisdictions and merits are thus cumulated without distinction. This application of this methodology results in the following numbers, also presented in the latest WIR. So investors win 27% of the time, states win 36% of the time, it's settled 26% of the time, and then it's discontinued 9% of the time.
But I also have an TPP is not implemented, so what's that for?
Well, no, this isn't for TPP. This is because Hasan said historically, like investors always win, and that the states get fucked on this. So I'm curious if that's actually true. I would have to see that.
Cases that have occurred in the past, the ones that have
the way it's crafted under TPP, the corporations get to pick the international tribunal. So there's a literally a conflict of interest problem in that respect. Are you citing
Sure,
numbers
that's
from what, the WTO?
So this is from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. I don't know if this only includes disputes settled by the WTO or if there are other international tribunals as well. That it's I'm just reading through this right now. But
now
my understanding was that like most of these like multilateral like trade bodies like generally favor the people that bring suits. Like I think in the WTO, I would have to look up the numbers for this again, but I'm pretty sure in the WTO, over half of the time, the person that brings suit is the one that wins the case as well. It wasn't just people being favored that were like part of large corporations or whatever.
No. Okay, no. You're making a good point.
I think that's a failure in perception.
Basically,
though.
the point is, hey, the way the system works right now, although it's very
if you're the first to act, then you win.
If we take the next step and implement something like TPP, that's when you get the giant bias because of how the tribunals are crafted. But what you're saying is under the current system, the way it works right now, according to the UN, it's a smaller percentage of the cases get determined on the side of the corporation versus the people, correct?
Wait, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that last
thing again?
First
to act is the person
the way the system is crafted right now, at least according to the UN, you're saying a smaller percentage of the cases go on the side of the corporation versus the government.
Maybe, I'm not sure. This is literally something that was just linked to me. I'd have to go through and read.
27%, you said.
That's according to this right here, but I don't know if this is keeping. So I don't know if this is measuring like everything from the WTO or what exactly. This is just something I'm reading. If you have like a different source on this, I'd be curious to read it. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, Haas, where did you get your number from? What number did you even say?
I said 94, but that's actually arbitration inside of corporations.
I
said that historically the big cases, the most famous cases, have oftentimes favored corporate. Well, even if it doesn't favor corporations, it has the capacity to restrict the autonomy and take away agency from a democratically elected president or a democratically elected government, and this has happened in like numerous cases that I was mentioning, but there's still a lot of there's still 27% that is, from what I understand, settled out of court. But ultimately, you have to look at what these things are, like what the issues are, because just because it in some instances favors the side of the state doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that there isn't an imbalance of power there, especially considering the people that you put in that position. Especially under TPP, would be just corporate cardboard cutouts, basically.
So
I mean, like, or sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't want to do too hard of a pivot here, but I just pulled up these numbers and I wanted to share them.
Yeah,
so I think this is from the Economic Policy Institute. Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed in 2015, and he laid out some of the stuff that they had spoken about since 2001. Nearly 60,000 manufacturing plants in this country have been shut down, and we've lost over 4.7 million decent-paying manufacturing jobs. NAFTA has led to the loss of nearly 700,000 jobs. Permanent normal trade relations with China has led to the loss of 2.7 million jobs. Our trade agreement with South Korea has led to the loss of about 75,000 jobs. While bad trade agreements are not the only reason why manufacturing jobs in the U.S. have declined, they're an important factor. So
I don't know if those are necessarily bad things, though.
So I was going to say that's like the heart of why I'm so hard on our trade agreements is that if you're a representative or you're a senator, you're a congressman in the U.S., your job is to represent your constituents. And what these people do is they don't give a fuck about them. They don't care about them.
Yeah, but like, I don't care. Yeah, I don't give a fuck about them, though. This is like part of my like economic position. I don't care about manufacturing jobs in the United States. If another country can do it for cheaper and we have the ability to like allocate our workforce to do other things, like this is comparative advantage 101. Why would I want to try to compete with another country on manufacturing when they can do it a million times cheaper? It gives people here the ability to do better jobs that pay more, hopefully. It gives people the ability to buy other things for cheaper prices. It gives you the ability to open up other types of jobs because people have more money to spend on things like this, right? If you've got to spend, $20 or $30 on a cheap t-shirt because we're going to manufacture everything made in America, I don't know. I just don't see that as being a win, that we have to punish every single American citizen to save our manufacturing jobs.
No, but okay, so it's not as drastic as the hypothetical you gave, because I remember reading a story on this years ago. I'll see if I can pull up the exact number, but it's only like, I don't know, 15 or 20 cents more to get something. Like, I think the example they were giving was for fast food, like a burger would be like 15 or 20 cents more to pay them a living wage as they did it. So it's the same, it's the same thing at work here. It's like, okay, you could pay
but then
a
they're
factory worker in the US a living wage,
practices
or you can outsource it to wherever, fill in blank, Burundi, I don't know,
so
and you pay them whatever, $1 an hour. But it's not Like, you
Or
don't
at
have
least
to pay
that's what
that
I've
much
been told
more.
from the
And we also
McDonald's
avoid that race
Corporation.
to the bottom. But basically, the perspective that you just gave, that's the exact argument that's made from the business owner. They're like, hey, listen, I own the company. I get to make the decisions. I'm going to, we'll make a little bit more money if we do this. I don't care about the people who live in fucking Bumblefuck, Ohio. Fuck them. But now to get to Hasan's main thesis here, and his whole point is that, well, then maybe something's inherently fucked up with the way our system functions, and maybe it shouldn't be this, like, little fucking dictator business owner philosopher king who gets to determine things and uproot people's lives willy-nilly and not give a fuck about it. That's like a huge problem. And a good solution to this would be you should have at least 50% of a board for a given company should be labor, because there's no way that they would decide collectively to outsource the jobs and ruin their own fucking communities.
Yeah, but we always look at it from one side where we hyper obsess, or lefties hyper obsess over like the merits of letting labor decide what they want to do. Well, labor is just going to vote in their own interest, and they're going to fuck other people as a result, like just as easily. Like, let's say, for instance, I have the ability to buy a t-shirt for $10, and there's like a t-shirt manufacturing firm down the street that's like worker run, and the workers are voting shit. Well, let's say that there's the opportunity that we could outsource all of their jobs, and I could buy that shirt for $2 or something. Right. They're never going to vote on that.
No,
so here I am having to spend more of my money in a regressive manner, right? Because chances are, if you're poor, you're spending a higher percentage of your income on like clothes and shit. Well, now this impacts even the lowest of people have to spend more money to save their shitty jobs because they don't want to export any of their jobs to another country because they're only looking out for themselves. Why does everybody have to suffer to save their jobs?
Because their wages are higher, Destiny. That's what you're missing. You're saying, oh my God.
Their wages, but only a small subset of the economy's wages are. Not everybody works at these plants who are going to be saving money.
What if that t-shirt is complete
You have to
shit
think about it
compared
from the perspective of
t-shirt that
you said it's a narrow perspective to only think about the labor.
Yeah, like look at like manufacturing cars in America. Every single person in America, or almost every person in America, is impacted by the cost of vehicles, right? Why the fuck would I save a couple cities worth of jobs?
The majority of people are the workers, so why should we care about the fucking asshole owner who's making these decisions? There's so many fewer owners than there are laborers. Why? It's like saying, why?
Well, I don't care about the owner, or I'm not looking at the owner. I'm not looking at the owner or the laborer. I'm looking at the consumer, right? What gets them the cheapest product so that they can allocate their money in the way that.
Right now, there's a race to the bottom. So, okay, I can go to Walmart and get really fucking cheap goods, but also my salary per year is $20 grand. If we retool the economy and make it so that you have workers on the boards, we wouldn't have wages that are so low. So people would have more money. And yeah, the goods might be 15 or 20 cents more if you go to Walmart or wherever, but you also have a hell of a lot more money in the bank. And this isn't like, we're not even talking like fucking theory here. There are countries that exist in the world right now that
I don't believe that most people would buy U.S.
like in
made
Germany,
goods
for example,
just
they have
because
50% of the board in
if
all
you,
the corporations
if you look at
is labor.
a difference
and
in price,
guess what? They're the sky hasn't fallen and goods aren't unattainable. If
Maybe
anything, they have a
that's
higher
again,
quality of life than we do.
Well, but Germany also is like within inside one of the largest, or I'm sorry, the largest market like in the whole world, right? Germany exists in the heart of the EU, so they can export and import from all sorts of people like within their own like trading block.
No, Destiny, you're incorrect. The reason why Germany is so successful is because it's the industrial engine that fuels the entirety of the EU. And guess why? Because they didn't actually outsource their factories over to China. They have massive factories in that country and a robust labor force. That is precisely why the German economy is so
Okay, so what happens to Germany if every other country decides to take the same protectionist approach and says, well, we're not going to import stuff manufactured in Germany, fuck you. Then Germany falls apart and goes to shit immediately.
No, this is why I said that
Wait, what do you mean no?
Manner. No, I'm saying this is why I said it's a complicated manner. Obviously.
Wait, no, it's not complicated. You just said, no, hold on, wait, just this one thing. You just said that the only reason Germany is able to do what it's doing is because they export manufacturing around the world. What if every other country took your approach and said, well, fuck you, we're not going to import what you manufacture in Germany? What happens to Germany at that point?
That's why I never said that I'm fully what do you think protectionism is? It's not about like completely shutting off any sort of completely shutting off opportunities from outside.
Yes, it is. To some extent, it is. Protectionism is the idea that you want to foster growth in certain industries, so you stop importing.
And I don't think anyone would be on board with that.
Okay, but it's not fair for you. It's not fair.
Hey, if you like cheap labor, then why not slave labor? Why not?
No, it's not fair. It's not fair for you to say, well, look, Germany's really successful because of their manufacturing, when Germany is thriving on the free trade of other countries. Of course, they can do well.
You are setting up a little bit of like a picture of the protectionist position. Like we all understand that is incredibly complicated. And that these are not you don't just take one to steal a phrase from Obama. You don't use a fucking hatchet when you need a scalpel. Like we all get that it's really complicated, but the idea that you don't even consider letting the board the workers have a bigger say on the board, or you don't consider in certain instances doing protectionist policies. I mean, this is all like it's all very rational stuff that has existed at certain
No,
points
I don't
in US
agree.
history.
In certain instances, I do think protectionist policy can be okay. If you want to protect certain fledgling industries, especially for like developing countries, I think that there are certain instances where protectionist policy, okay, this is to be decided by economists, not a dumb fuck board of laborers that don't know anything about international trade. I would never trust a person whose job is on the line to vote for like a sensible policy related to their job. Absolutely not.
They're there to protect their own interests, Destiny.
Right? They don't. Oftentimes, you have like some of the biggest fucking assholes. Like they still say Art Laffer isn't a fucking economist. He's been wrong about every single fucking thing he's ever said. They still say Larry Kudlow like is an economist or is an expert about the economy. The dude's been wrong about everything he's ever said. So there is no like democratic interests are just as important as having people who can crunch the numbers and be experts on this stuff. Because
100%.
For the economy, it's not like math where the answer is the answer and that's the end of the fucking conversation. There actually are competing theories. And there are, like, just think about it, of Keynesianism, for example. They don't say, like, at all times, doing quantitative easing is a good thing. But sometimes quantitative easing is a good thing. So it is a complicated thing, and you do need to kind of weigh the different interest groups, whether it's labor, whether it's economists, and what they're telling you is the right thing to do at the time. I mean, it's not an easy answer.
I mean, like, I would love to revisit this like at a later time because I don't have like all my sources on hand. But like, I had a debate where I had to debate some guy against Trump's protectionist policies, and I did a fuck ton of reading this. I couldn't find a single fucking economist. What?
Yeah, because his
no, not just related to Trump. But when I tried to do reading about protectionism, I couldn't find any economist worth his weight in salt that would actually come and be like, oh yeah, protectionist policies are generally good. Every time it's been practiced in the United States, it's been done for stupid political reasons. It's generally always resulted in net losses. It seems like most economists believe that most of our like multilateral trade agreements, including things like NAFTA, have generally benefited the America in general. Now, some industries have been like hurt. So for instance, agriculture in places like California or manufacturing in places like Detroit maybe suffer, but as a whole, like America tends to benefit. That seems to be the position, but I don't like have these sources like on hand. But this idea that like anybody supports like protectionist policies as a means to build or help an economy, or that like multilateral trade agreements are bad, I don't know. I would have to go back and like dig through sources and shit on this. Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem with what you just laid out right there.
Yeah,
it's like the people who, and it's always conservatives that they'll always bring up like the GDP or how the fucking stock market is doing as if it's like a good indicator of how your average American is doing. And you see a lot of the same shit happening with, certain economists when they talk about trade, where they act like, bro, I don't see the problem. Look, the profits are soaring, so everybody's by definition doing well. It's like, well, yeah, your spectrum of analysis is so narrow that it's doing well in the confines of the spectrum you just laid out. But that's not an accurate spectrum. It's like, the point that Haas kind of alluded to before, where people always are like, oh, bro, you can't have a minimum wage, because if you have a minimum wage, it will by definition lead to unemployment. So you can't have it. And obviously employment, this is like a key economic indicator that we need to care about. It's super important. Well, then you can easily respond to that by saying, okay, there's a way we can have literally full employment 100% across the board. You know how? Slavery. Does that mean we should do slavery? No. Like, it's a shitty, narrow way of analyzing how the economy.
I don't disagree with you, but like on one end, having a bigger pie is better. You just have to figure out how to divvy it up, right? So like, I don't disagree, for instance, that companies that take advantage of immigrant labor or companies that take advantage of exporting their supply chain to other countries to make higher profits probably aren't helping us if they're not distributing those earnings to either their American workers or to other people in the United States. So I'm in favor, I think like you are, of like greater like redistributive tax policies and stuff like that. If you take advantage of exporting your supply chain to other countries, if other people manufacture it for you, maybe you should have to pay a higher tax in America that takes care of people that don't have these types of jobs or that are suffering as a result of this. I'm okay with things like that. What I'm not okay with is saying, well, because corporations benefit from this economically beneficial thing, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot and say, fuck our economy. We're going to throw away all the stuff that we know is good just because it only benefits a narrow subsection of Americans, rather than saying, well, let's take this thing that benefits a narrow subsection of Americans, let's tax them for it, and then we can redistribute the winnings to everybody so that we can continue to take good economic practices like into our decision-making thing, and then use our tax policy to reward or punish people accordingly. I feel like that's like the better approach to things.
If we didn't do NAFTA, if we didn't do permanent normal with China, if we didn't do CAFTA, do you think we'd be in a worse position today or a better position today?
I think we'd absolutely be in a worse position, no question asked.
I totally disagree with that. I think we'd be in a much better position. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like every
Why do you
analysis
think we'd be in a worse position? Because like consumer goods would be a little bit more expensive, or what do you?
You say a little bit more. Everybody acts like, oh, well, an iPhone would just cost like $1. Maybe the iPhone won't even exist. I mean,
let me inject a fact here quick, because I actually was able to successfully find the thing that I was trying to reference earlier. According to researchers Ken Jacobs, David Graham Squire, and Stephanie Lucci, 41.4% of a pay increase to $12 an hour would go to workers in, okay, sorry, let me cut to the chase, the number here. 46 cents is how much more a family would pay at Walmart if Walmart decided to pay a living wage. 46 cents more for your average purchase. So in other words,
wait, this is minimum wage policy. This has nothing to do with international trade or protectionism.
But I referenced this before. It was an ancillary point that was talking to the same principle. So I just wanted to give you the exact number. Bottom line is, yes, you can have regulation on the economy, and it's not like all of a sudden, if you do the regulation, that it's going to be worse off for everybody. In fact, basically my point is, for tiny trade-offs, you have massive benefit. So if you craft these trade deals in a way that are fair to workers, you can still have the upsides of not shooting yourself in the foot, to use your language, without destroying the economy. So you can help workers and also not be in a little isolationist bubble where you can't get certain goods because you're totally anti-trade. It's a little bit of a false dichotomy to act like, oh, if we're a little bit more protectionist and we care about workers, that somehow that'll tank our standing in the world economy or something like that.
Okay.
Yes,
100%.
But no economist will back this position up.
I know, but
we can dig into. I really want to revisit with state. Well, hold on, because you're basically laying out a really pretty story to me that has never been borne out ever. All these countries that have tried, with very rare examples, maybe Japan post World War II. It's usually very rare that a country enacts hyper protectionist policies and it ends up benefiting the country. It seems generally that when you open trade, even for every analysis I've seen on NAFTA, for every American job lost, you gain so much in terms of productivity or decreased prices of consumer goods, that all of these things seem to be borne out pretty well. And to say I don't know. So what exactly is your argument that somehow we can protect manufacturing jobs by paying
everyone suffers from learning from the same school of thought. Everyone is a neoclassical economist, and therefore they all have similar understandings in regards to the importance of GDP rather than the conditions of the working class. So
yeah,
that's precisely why you don't hear a lot of Marxian economist takes either. Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
No, well, I was going to say my argument is that those numbers that I was citing are numbers that I think are super important in the conversation in terms of how many people's lives. I mean, I'm
curious. Can you we don't have to go over this now because I'll go over this later. Can you shoot me whatever you have later? You don't have to do this now, but whatever you see where it's if we just spent 20 cents more, every worker would have a living wage, or I'd be really curious in seeing stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll send it to you. Of course.
And further, to further drive home that point that I was making before, the same argument centered around increasing taxes in the past. The same argument centered around increasing the minimum wage, or at least adjusting it back to inflation. And economists also, just like you said before, Stephen, all had the same arguments, and they all were essentially in agreement that raising the minimum wage was going to hurt the working class. And look what happened in places like Seattle, in other places where they have implemented these minimum wage requirements.
I don't think that's true, though. I think that economists are usually pretty mixed on things like minimum wage.
No, now
you have to look at history, though.
No. What I'm talking about, don't turn around and tell me that the minimum wage argument wasn't consistent, or that economists absolutely did not have the same perspective in regards to what was happening in Seattle or anywhere that minimum wage has been implemented in the past. Economists don't have mixed feelings over this. They have mixed feelings after the fact.
No, Destiny's right that there are mixed feelings, but the mixed feelings are that there's Austrian economists who've been wrong about everything else who chime in now and say, if you raise the minimum wage in any capacity, even if you just have a minimum wage, it will by definition lead to unemployment, which is of course bad, which means we can't have a minimum wage, and we certainly can't raise it. That's the general argument, but there's actually plenty of economic literature which says as long as you raise the minimum wage in a way that's reasonable. So in other words, you can't jack it up from $7.25 to $15 overnight, because that actually would lead to job loss. But if you do it over time and you do it carefully, then yes, you can do it, and it will have minimal effect on job loss. And in some instances, there was even a gain in employment. But the final thing I wanted to say on this particular topic is that I'm very curious, and I actually do not know what he would say, but there's a left-wing economist who I deeply respect. His name's Professor Richard Wolff, and I'm very curious his thoughts on trade, because he surprised me some, like, he doesn't have down the line view where you could just predict everything he's going to say, and he has really solid arguments for everything he talks about. So I'm very curious what his thoughts are on this. I would be surprised if he said that, you know, like NAFTA and CAFTA and the World Trade Organization have been a net benefit for the economy as a whole, even just putting aside workers. I think he would probably make the argument that it's been bad as a whole. But that being said, I'll bite my tongue now because I don't know what he would say.
Sure, yeah. We could revisit things like globalization and come back, I guess, on trade. But like, yeah, I feel like every time I've done this research in the past, it's always like reaffirmed my position like a million times over. It seems like I've never found like this huge body of work or all these economists that are like, oh yeah, like we need to hardcore protect our industries. Like it'll definitely benefit the average American worker. It just never seems to be the case. It seems like if you want to make these trade-offs, what you're doing at the end of the day is you're saying, we are going to arbitrarily value certain American jobs. So we'll say manufacturing, and we're going to do that at the cost and detriment to every other American worker. And
so if you're importing goods from an external source and it's cheaper than what you can do to produce it in your nation, obviously it's at a detriment to produce it within your nation. Say anything otherwise, coal, steel, whatever it may be. Steel is a big byproduct of doing business with Chinese. Why would you buy steel at $10 when you can get it for $5? They are depriving everyone in the Chinese spectrum of their basic human rights and producing steel at a lower cost as okay. If we're looking at it from a globalist perspective, you just look at it from where is the resource readily available. It has nothing to do with worker resources, because one worker's time is worth as much as the next worker's. But what he's saying, what Destiny is saying, why would you disable your own country at the benefit of another country to say, well, we're going to pay $10 an hour versus the 20 cents an hour a Chinese work, and tough shit, you're going to have to pay for that. If you're a nationalist, you need to pay that exorbitant cost. Ridiculous to assume that anyone would actually buy it.
Okay.
And the increase of 46 cents or whatever.
Sure.
But
I don't like the idea that we need to keep our economy the way that it's always been. Like we can't like move our economy forward because we have to protect some other workers. Like I'd rather like continue to innovate in our economy and move forward. Go ahead.
Just to be clear, I don't believe that. I don't think we have to keep the economy exactly as it is, and I don't think I think that your portrayal of a more protectionist trade policy, like Bernie Sanders would advocate for, and many lefties would advocate for, I think it's a little bit of a caricatured view of it. I think that, yeah, but we don't have to keep talking about this.
I think
we can
it's
get
pretty
to other stuff.
straightforward.
Should we?
This is like my last topic, so because I have to leave in like 5 minutes ago.
Wait, Kyle, do you want to stay on after this? I want to bring in Trihex again and continue the conversation, or do you have to run?
No, I'm good for another like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. You could bring him in.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. Destiny, are you gonna leave now, or how much longer do you have? I didn't hear you. Sorry.
I can probably hang out for like 5 more minutes.
Okay, cool. All right.
All right. So, do you want to disagree or agree in that 5 minutes?
Let's
keep disagreeing.
It's more fun to disagree.
All right. So let's do political violence. I think actually all three of us might have different views on this. Like that one was kind of me and Haas versus you, Destiny. But I think all three.
Here's my position on political violence.
So political violence. What's your stance, Haas? We'll start with you.
Okay, there's different forms of violence, as I tried to mention last time we had this conversation. For example, structural violence, like poverty, the violence that causes you to go out and do jobs that you don't want to do because of the fear that if you don't take on these
it's a one for one, right? So
you won't be able to actually
make my people
put food on your table and put a shelter over your head and protect your family. So,
bombing,
and then there's systemic
some
violence
sort of
that we
facility
also
that
usually
is making
normalize, like
people
state violence
horrible.
or police violence. These sorts of things
No
that most people
violence,
don't have,
period.
like most average apolitical people don't have issue with. And
No
then
violence,
there's, I guess, what we
period.
would consider political
End of story.
violence, the third form, which oftentimes is outside of the norm or is considered as outside of the norm, like violence to capital or like anti-fascist mobilization. And I happen to think that while I don't advocate for it, I won't stand in the way of it, especially when it comes to the, especially if it's used as a last-ditch effort. And I think one of the successes of this could be seen in the Gilets jaunes movement in France, where they're literally fucking burning the entire city every weekend and have been able to successfully get the government to at least listen to them. And historically speaking, political violence of that sort is not only morally justifiable, as I'm sure Steve will mention, but also has been rather successful, and it is actually Mayday right now. A consequence of political violence is the 40-hour work week and no more child labor and having weekends off. That is directly a consequence of political violence.
Okay, what do you think, Destiny? What's your take on political violence?
I think that the distinction that I draw is that I think a lot of it can be morally justified, but I think right now where we exist in like the U.S., I don't think it's effective right now. Well, or rather, forms can be, but I wouldn't say, for instance, like we should go out and kill all conservatives, but I think that things like violent riots and whatnot could probably bring attention to certain issues that people feel like are like horribly impacting their lives. So, for instance, things like the elimination of healthcare in the United States, the ACA, or things like related to DACA recipients. Or maybe labor laws or stuff like that.
Okay, so I kind of, first of all, that was an interesting point that you made, Haas, about how there's different kinds of political violence and how, one is basically like you're now forced to go get a job that you don't want to do because if you didn't, you're like, whatever, you'll be on the street. Like that is a form of political violence. For purposes of this conversation, though, I'm just going to put aside like all those forms of like that kind of political violence and just focus on a more narrow definition of like, hand on fucking club hitting somebody over the head or shooting somebody, so I agree that I think history shows that certain forms of political violence can be very useful and can work. And riots, for example, they do tend to, there's evidence that they but I think my position on this is I think we can achieve the same things through more nonviolent methods. So if you pick a goal, whatever the goal might be, I don't care. Oh, we got to get Medicare for all, or we got to stop the violent deportation of people who obviously shouldn't be deported. I think that can be achieved through a general strike where you have high levels of participation and you can basically ground the economy to a halt. And as the old saying goes, if the poor won't provide food, the rich will have to eat money. So they have no out, they have nowhere to go. And then they will be forced to take action on whatever the issue may be that we're doing the mass mobilization over. So I think that I actually think that we need to take a pretty strong principled stance against all offensive forms of political violence. Because I think that once you open that door, you've agreed to a principle that will then immediately be used by the right, and the right is actually better when it comes to violence because it's almost inherent in their ideology.
What do you say to people, though, that feel like violence is already being enacted against them? So for instance, like somebody, like say you're on healthcare and now the Republicans are basically saying, hey, by the way, the ACA is going away. And you're like, well, fuck, like I'm literally fucked. Like my life could theoretically be over. And then you're like, well, I'm going to go out and riot. And so I was like, well, hold on, dude, don't be violent. Like, don't you think that is kind of shitty?
Yes, I'm in favor. The only kind of violence that I support, and this is not just domestically, this is also internationally. I think the only way you could justify it is if it's defensive in nature. So if you have a strong enough case that there is indeed offensive violence being done on you, then you do.
So we've spoken the problem initially. The problem is with definition of violence. Like if you're gonna slowly choke me. That's not perceived as violent these days. Perceived as like, cut off your health care. We're gonna make it impossible for you to make a living. We're gonna make it impossible for you to kids. Whereas actual violence is perpetrated in front of the media in the form of Molotov cocktail and beating police, shooting them. There's definitely a difference, but if you can differentiate between the two and say, well, this thing is instantaneous, but this thing is slow, wouldn't you say that this is more of like violent death? If it's slow, encumbered, and so forth. Anyway, moving on.
But what happens when there are scabs? What happens when you try to stop that from happening? What happens when the government, as it historically has, decides, fuck that, we're going to bring over the police force and break this strike in its entirety? At that point, that's why I said I'm not in favor of it as a first action. It's not a great first measure, and I don't even think even anarchists or anyone here would agree that it's a solid first measure or solid first step. These are multivariate problems that require multivariate solutions, where we have, on the one hand, peaceable options on the table. We have the Martin Luther King Jr. protesting in the streets, doing civil disobedience, and then you also have Malcolm X on the side protecting black communities, oftentimes with armed forces if necessary, while also doing things like the breakfast program.
So I think I'm like a little more sensitive to optics though than you, Haas, because, and maybe even is because I actually do think that as a general rule, anytime there's some form of left-wing violence, it will immediately be portrayed as like, they're the violent ones, they're the thugs, they're doing this offensively. And so you have to kind of account for that level of propaganda and misleading in your analysis of when it makes sense to use violence. And
I feel like the counter propaganda to that point, though, is still always going to be the problem. Is like, and even it sounds like, I'm not saying you're doing this intentionally, but it almost sounds like you're writing off completely the violence committed by the other side.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, like so here, I'll give it a personal, because I know we love stories so much, right? I had a friend that worked at McDonald's. He fucking hated his job, but he had worked there for the past 5 years, and he knew he was going to die at that job because he had type 1 diabetes, and there was no way that he could leave that job because he had health insurance through them. There's just no way. He can't ever switch jobs because of that pre-existing condition. Although under the ACA, that changed, right? But because he had type 1 diabetes, he was stuck at that job forever because health insurance is usually tied to your job. So this is a person whose life is being like immeasurably fucked. Like, imagine being like 30 years old and it's like, I have to work at McDonald's and I can't do anything different. Like, your economic opportunity is fucked, your educational opportunity is fucked, maybe your ability to create a family is fucked. All of this is basically, completely destroying your life. Maybe you get a way out of that due to the ACA, and other Republicans are like, nope, we're taking that away. To tell a person like that, well, hold on, dude, like, look at the optics of you, like, going after them. Isn't that really fucked? Shouldn't the answer to that person be like, or rather, wouldn't that person say, well, your optics are actually fucked. Violence is being enacted against me every single fucking day by the state, and there's literally, like, no recourse for me. Like, I'm totally fucked.
Well, I wouldn't say to that guy, your optics are fucked. I wouldn't say that to him specifically.
Wasn't that what you're saying to Hasan, though, right now, technically?
Well, I'm just saying that in general, the left should be aware of that, because it's so, I've seen it time and time again, where left is immediately portrayed as like, look at these violent thugs rioting, and it's totally senseless violence. And I just think we need to be cognizant of that. But I'm not saying that therefore now our principle should change, or our standard on when political violence makes sense changes. And for that guy's situation, first, let me just ask you, what should be done in that situation? What should he do in that situation?
Can I just step in really quickly and bring up a historical point that I think is important?
I love you all very much. I have to leave. I should have left a long time ago. I'm so sorry. Okay, but you guys listen. Carry on. I love you guys very much. Okay, everybody can go to Hasan's channel if you want to watch the continuation of this conversation. Have fun.
Bye, Destiny.
See you, man.
See you,
okay. Hold on. I need to reconfigure everything now.
Continue with the Anno 1800.
The thing I was going to say is,
we'll get Trihex
hopes
in
and
here.
prayers.
Yeah, I'm going to bring him in right
hopes
now.
And fucking prayers,
the thing I was going to mention really quickly is that when Martin Luther King, and I think you and I both agree that it was a largely peaceful protest, right? Like he was very much in favor of civil disobedience, and I don't think anyone actually considers it like the movements that his movement to be, his movement to be offensive in any way. Looking back at it now, at the time, I believe it was 67% of the country that still thought that they were being violent thugs, and I think it's like an old anarchist saying where the violence only starts when the protesters throw back the tear gas. So it's like that is, I think, a really great way of understanding the difference between what kind of violence is expected and what kind of violence is completely normalized versus what kind of violence is unexpected and is susceptible to public perception. And that's why I always say, like, look, it might look bad right now, but that's why you got to have a strong ground for, you got to have a level of respect for anti-fascist mobilization and even movements like the J20 protests that occurred, for example, where the government basically did fucking dragnet during the inauguration and arrested a bunch of journalists and a bunch of other protesters simply because structural damage had occurred. I'm going to fix your camera really quickly, too, while you...
What's that? What do I have to do?
No, you're fine. I'm just fixing your camera and also bringing up Skyhex.
Okay, so my response to that would be, I think that the reason today Martin Luther King is viewed as a hero is actually because he was also super principled in his pursuit of justice. And you could go back and find now like countless examples of him talking about how, it is morally superior to be nonviolent and to try to impact change and actually fix society through this path. And he even goes as far, he's almost like literally like Jesus in his philosophy, in a way that I don't go as far as he does. He's almost like a genuine pacifist. Like, oh, if somebody hits you, turn the other cheek. So now I don't agree with pacifism. I'm okay with violence for defensive purposes, but it's because he was so principled, and we all know what his stance is on nonviolence, that in due time, now he's viewed as like a giant hero because he was right on the substance of what he was fighting for, and he was super principled in his pursuit. And I feel like we can't be like willy-nilly on the issue of violence, because the only way history judges the left kindly is also if they're super principled and clear that, hey man, we didn't start the fire. We're here to fight back. We're here to try to fix the problem and do it in a way that's pure and in a way that still upholds our morals and our ethics. What's up, Triax?
Hey, what's up, y'all? Sorry about that. Sorry if I interrupted anything.
No, not at all.
How's it going?
Heard there was a leftist Illuminati union going on, and I wasn't invited, so I wanted to pop in real quick.
Did you see the debate on trade or no? Did you get to see it?
No. I was busy playing Smash earlier. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to join. I saw y'all were like waist deep in some talk there, so I just didn't know if I should be on standby or what. So I ended up just playing some games while waiting for y'all to see what was going on.
Yeah, we debated trade, and it was basically me and Haas versus Destiny there for a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I think you did a really good job with that, Kyle. For the record.
Thanks, man. You too. It was actually somewhat unfair because it was like 2 versus 1.
Yeah. No, Destiny's used to that. Well, the difference is he's not used to having a 2v1 with like 2 people who know what the fuck they're talking about. He's normally doing
left.
like
we were arguing with him from the left.
That's the issue.
Would y'all enjoy recapping what it was? Like, it was the argument over open trade versus
so
domesticated trade.
He was basically arguing for a more free trade approach to the economy, and we were arguing for a slightly more protectionist approach. And we were taking the stance of NAFTA was bad, permanent normal trade relations with China was bad. It led to destroyed manufacturing towns. And his position was basically, I'm trying my best not to strawman him here. I'm going to try and give him the best view of what he was saying. His argument was, even though there were downsides to free trade, the upsides outweigh the downsides. And so since we get cheaper products, and since it's helped the economy in other ways, therefore free trade is better than having a more protectionist approach. That was basically the argument. And it went on for a solid amount of time. We probably argued, what would you say, Haas, 40 minutes or so on that?
I guess, yeah. But now we're talking about political violence and whether it's acceptable or not, or if it's completely unacceptable on all forms. The thing I was going to say again, by the way, Kyle, I want to hear your perspective on Malcolm X, for example, or Fred Hampton.
So I actually think Malcolm X gets a little bit of a bad, well, not a little bit of a bad rap. He gets a giant bad rap when actually, if you go back and listen to his speeches, he was really clear all along that he only believed in violence for defensive purposes. So I actually am in total agreement with Malcolm X on that.
Okay, so you're in agreement with me on it too then, because my opinion is never of the mindset that we should be going out and fucking bike locking random MAGA hat wearing dipshits on college campuses or punching them. My opinion is very similar to Malcolm X's on this. And I think a lot of leftist people who argue on behalf of anti-fascism also seem to agree with that perspective that like this is always defensive.
Well, I don't know, because if you test that principle with them, they'll often like back off of it pretty quickly, because all you have to do is bring up the punching Richard Spencer incident and they're all like, yeah, that was a good idea. And it's like, well, no, that was offensive. Like he wasn't about to attack anybody.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of offensive.
The Richard Spencer argument again goes back to kind of the similar thing that I mentioned before, but that is completely. This is the reason why anti-fascism is localized and decentralized and has nothing. There's no like main authoritative body. One, because they're fucking anarchists, so obviously that's probably an unjustifiable hierarchy to begin with. But two, this is all about self-protection. And a lot of people who call themselves Marxists or anarchists are under the assumption that the very presence of a Nazi, given the fact that Nazi ideology and fascist ideology ultimately, as we all have seen before, turns into a violent one because it's built upon the principle of exclusion, that having a free reign for someone like Richard Spencer to be normalized in public and giving them a platform and simply treating it as though it's a difference in opinion is a very destructive thing to do. And we've seen the consequences of that, and we've seen the positive results of what happens when you deplatform people like Milo Yiannopoulos in a non-violent way, which I'm also in favor of. And we've seen what happened to Richard Spencer in that similar fashion. Richard Spencer talked about how afraid he was to go out in public. Now, I totally see the counter to this. I totally see the other side of this, where it's like, well, what happens if the barrel of the gun is pointed at you? What happens when people vilify you for your perspectives? Well, the only thing I'll say to that is people not only vilify me for my perspective, and I'm comfortable with that because I know that this is something that I have to deal with. It's a part of the process, and I wish it wasn't true. But people also enact actual violence upon marginalized communities, and Richard Spencer's entire ideology is built around the justification of that marginalization or the justification of that violence. When Milo went to college campuses, he outed trans people, outed immigrant dreamers and immigrant students, and he reported them just as a joke, just as a fun little thing. And I would argue that leads to much more devastating and much more violent outcomes that oftentimes are normalized by our administration because it does not pose any specific threat to the established order. So that's why punching someone like Richard Nazi would be a justifiable action to make.
Yeah, see, this is where we disagree, because I think that in order to get to the point where you're making the argument that punching him in that context is defensive, at that point I think you're just bullshitting. It's like, it's such a tortured explanation, like, oh, because he believes this thing, and because he's spoken about it publicly, therefore it's actually defensive to fucking sucker punch him when he's not even looking. It's like, no, that's obviously offensive, and we need to call a spade, and that's what it is. And we can hold this belief, like two beliefs at the same time. Number one is Richard Spencer is a giant piece of shit, and he's wrong about virtually everything.
That's it.
And he's dangerous. And also, you shouldn't punch anybody offensively, especially when like they're not fucking paying attention or anything and not looking. So. And I know this might get me some shit, because I think I voiced this opinion at the time, like, yeah, don't just randomly punch people. And people got mad at me, but you know what? I still think that that's the case. Like, again, when we say violence only makes sense for defensive purposes, I'm quite literal about that. Now, the only gray area Haas, is actually what you brought up before, and what Destiny was talking about, which is, well, what do you do when there's structural violence, and that structural violence isn't even like kind of ambiguous, and maybe it is, maybe it's not there. This is like legit. No, because of the structure of the system, there's violence being enacted upon you. In that situation, it's like you are totally justified to do violence because it's defensive, but I would say it has to be proportionate also. And I would also say we should probably exhaust every option possible not being violent before you get to the violent option.
Full agree. Full agree. And
I
by
agree.
the way,
Yeah.
for the record, sorry, Triax, not to cut you off, but for the record, that's precisely why I mentioned anti-fascism. The anti-fascist ideology, and there's a long and robust history behind this as well, leading all the way back to the 1930s and more modern movements. But the anti-fascist ideology revolves around destabilizing and cutting off the momentum against fascist ideology. Anti-fascists would not exist if fascists did not exist. That's why that's why you didn't really hear about Antifa or anti-fascism before Trump came into a position of power, even though they were, they would exist in places like Europe where there were neo-Nazi movements and other fascist movements. And the other thing I'm going to mention is they do exhaust all the other options. Richard Spencer being punched in the face or Richard Spencer being threatened in a physical fashion was a last measure, a last-ditch effort. It was after all other opportunities were exhausted, and yet Richard Spencer was still getting a dramatic amount of media coverage. Now, I'm not saying people should go out and punch Nazis in the face randomly or, go out, do it as a first measure. Now, some people might want to do that. I'm not going to sit here and cry over it for too long. I'm not saying that you are, by the way. I'm just like, that's my specific take on it. But this only comes about after we're like, hey, first you shine a light on it, and you show people that this person is a Nazi, and then you explain to people why being a Nazi is bad, because some people literally need to fucking hear that, unfortunately. And then you do everything you can to ensure that this person's voice is not amplified in the marketplace of ideas, because they're not operating on similar terms. They're not operating in good faith. They're operating on misinformation. They're bad faith actors. And you achieve the deplatforming measures from a multitude of different ways. You call places that are hosting Richard Spencer and urge them not to do this. You protest. You try to disrupt the speeches that are happening. These are all non-violent methods that make someone uncomfortable, but they're still non-violent methods. And finally, the last measure effort there is that because this idea, again, is based upon exclusion and based upon violence, and there is historic examples of this ideology turning very violent very quickly, people in a last-ditch defensive effort try to put fear in the heart of someone like Richard Spencer.
Yeah, but I think we disagree here though, because that's I feel like that's just putting lipstick on a pig by defining what they did as defensive. I just don't agree that it's defensive. And I think that I know the arguments for, trying to deplatform somebody like Spencer, but I honestly don't think, even if there was no attempt to deplatform those kinds of people, I don't think that like one day we wake up and they have 50+1% support in the country. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have other complete and utter bigoted demagogues rise to power, as we've seen with Trump. And, many Republicans are pretty much fly that flag and are proud of that. But I think it's a little bit hyperbolic when the argument is made that like, oh my God, if we don't take this drastic action of like sucker punching somebody in the face, then next thing we know, we're going to have like, fucking a new Gestapo storming the streets and Richard Spencer is going to be in the White House. So I don't agree with that. And also, I think I agree with Noam Chomsky when Noam Chomsky said that in many respects, Antifa is a gift to the right because it allows them to turn around and say, see, you got these, this violent group of people going around punching people in the face and doing property damage when Milo was going to go give a speech or whatever. And I mean, hey, if you want to be with the reasonable people, join us here on the right. Be with the marauding band of violent lunatics, right? And so I don't think we should, be willy-nilly about that. I think it's actually a really compelling argument. And that, again, I don't want to go as far as to say like, oh, everybody associated in that movement is violent or agrees with violence. But I do think that they need to be a lot more clear about the conversation you and I were having before, which is that, hey, listen, man, we only believe in violence for purely defensive reasons, and we're going to bend over backwards to make sure that's not the case, and that we're not going to do violence when we shouldn't be doing violence. But here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to enact systemic change, and we're trying to do it in a way that's moral and just and ethical. And I feel like if you lead by example with morality and ethics, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did, then we go, oh, well, in time, then you're recognized as like, you know, the amazing human being you were, crusading for all
timely
the right
recognition
things.
is not very important to me, but like actually succeeding in like building political momentum and like winning and actually giving, actually allowing progressive change or forcing government's hand to implement progressive change is what's important to me. And that's why I was saying, and I don't disagree with you in regards to MLK, but that's precisely why I bring up Malcolm X. And what I mentioned there is like this is a two-part effort. Actually, there's multiple parties involved, but violent elements within your ranks should not immediately be dismissed, or at the very least, even if you stay away from that, there is definitely a place for that in every movement. Just like there's a place for that and there is already an existing place for that in the Nazi side of things. They do that all the time. I mean, you look at the fucking Coast Guard guy, the lieutenant that just got arrested and was released, where he had an entire arsenal and he had a hit list of Democratic politicians that he wanted to kill, and they let him go.
And you know why he was caught? You know why he was caught? Because he was posting about it on social media, and then so there's a good argument to be made.
I'm not saying do it on social media, Kyle, and I don't think these people do it on social media.
There's a good argument there that because of free speech and because this person was like allowed to voice their shit in the open, that's why he was caught.
Well then, but they released him. That's what the point I was trying to make is that when the administration, look, the example I'll give you is this. So, during the McCarthyist era, when communists and socialists were being hunted, right? Basically being hunted. You know who actually had freedom of speech? The Nazis, the KKK. They were able to walk down the streets and march and exercise their First Amendment rights without fear. And the reason why they were able to do that is because white supremacy is built into the core of this, of like the American understanding of politics. And more importantly than that, racism and misogyny and these sorts of things, especially, but like violent Nazi rhetoric, does not pose a structural threat to the established order. And that's precisely why the establishment will use freedom of speech on them, but won't use freedom of speech as a protective measure when it comes to marginalized communities who are trying to win some political power back, win some autonomy.
They just did with the BDS ruling. They just ruled that the government cannot suppress.
All right. So they're basically saying like shut down the Nazis. Shut down the Nazis. Tell them to fuck the fuck off. Which I agree with, as long as their message is heard. Right? If it's a failed message, kind of. All right, Simonson, do you agree with Destiny? Pitch that up because I'm about to go on a fucking rant. You have the Nazis, and they're pitching some sort of fucking bullshit agenda. You have the left wing of everything. They are also pitching, I won't say some sort of bullshit agenda because I might be thrown out of this whole discourse. But both people are fucking wrong. How can you justify saying that, well, left-wing people are fucking right, and right people are fucking wrong, and just throw out the centrist fucking position? It's completely wrong. It's completely fucking wrong. I'm not saying like Nazis were right and fucking justifying killing fucking Jews. I'm saying that there is a centrist position that we should all be searching for. If we're not doing that, then we're just fucking shills for either the left or the right. Where is it? Rude. No, tell me. I love Destiny. I fall asleep to Destiny.
What I'm talking about is basically a more principled and moral and admittedly idealistic idea to enact change. And, you know, but I do understand that there are, like,
we're being doxxed, boys. The fuck? I think I'll pee in between this and
to work, and if you don't work, then you're not going to get your medicine. And like, that is a form of violence. That's certainly a form of structural violence. Work here or else you might die. And you can't even skip a beat or fucking go like try to switch jobs, because then you might have to go a week without your medicine, and that's not possible. So I take that there's so many, like, you know, issues with this approach where it's like, it's not perfect. But actually, another way of looking at that is that's all the more reason why something like a general strike should have been like yesterday. You know, like, let's all get out there and let's all bring about the change that we need, that we have to bring about. And let's try to do it in a way where, you know, it becomes undeniable who the right people are and who the wrong people are. And I take that I know it's a difficult thing, but I have hope. I have hope. And did you get to see Knock Down the House yet? The Netflix documentary that just came out about Justice Democrats? Because
I
it
saw
has
the
AOC in it, right?
I saw the videos. Like, I saw the
AOC,
teasers.
Cori Bush.
Were you in it?
Amy Villela. I'm not in it, and Jank's not in it. But it's basically like all the campaigns themselves and what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. And if you watch that, I guarantee you it'll give both of you so much hope. You'll be like, oh shit, everything's not hopeless.
But Kyle, I agree with you. That's why I'm in a unique position where I love everything you do and promote everything you do in regards to like electoral politics, and still maintain the position that also Chomsky somewhat agrees with me, or at least agreed with me back in the 60s, in regards to how certain forms of violence can be acceptable as long as the moral consequences, as long as it achieves the greater moral good. And something that the chat also mentioned that I love to talk about. Yeah, I'll show you in a second. The legitimacy. It's called the legitimacy of violence as a political act. But it's a nuanced take, and you and I both agree on it. And it's obviously like Chomsky's perspective might have changed over the years, but the concept that I'm trying to get everyone familiar with here is that regardless, like, caring about outside perception or caring about public perception is, in some instances, especially when it comes to marginalized groups trying to win political power, is always going to be a losing battle. And that's precisely why Martin Luther King had that famous white moderate speech, where he talked about how he was no longer disillusioned with the white moderate who cares more about the what is it, the notion of order than the negative, the white moderate who prefers a negative peace.
It's a good point, but I actually know, I think the exact example that Chomsky gave and what you're talking about, and what he said is, if you have like a whole batch of new weaponry that's going to go over to Vietnam to aid in the genocide that's happening over there, if you had a group of like people who snuck into that factory at night and basically blew up all of the weaponry and the fucking tanks and armament that was about to go to massacre innocent people overseas, that is a defensible form of violence, because it is in essence defensive. And again, that's something that I don't see fault with that. I find it hard to argue against certain kinds of violence when the argument is compelling enough that in the context of the structure of the system, it is defensive.
Okay,
But,
that's fair. We're in a similar position.
Can't hear you, by the way. I'm seeing green marks on my screen, so I guess I was fighting against that. So Antifa versus the base stickmen, right? I don't believe either side is correct. I believe that Antifa believes that their side is correct. I believe that based side of things believes that they're correct. But you have these fringe groups that are on both sides of the argument. You have the super racist, the white nationalists, so on and so forth, that are kind of integrated in between the based group. You have the Antifa, which basically integrate themselves in between all of the people that are simply fighting for leftist ideals. And I don't believe that either side is correct in enacting any sort of violence against the other side. You need to beat these people in the court of public opinion, not, and this will be backed up. Have you ever seen the game Riot? Check out the game Riot. Like it sounds like a failed argument, but the whole idea is if you can say that you were justified in your beliefs, and maybe the political violence that you enacted to kind of make your beliefs apparent, then you are the winner in this confrontation. Charlottesville, that's kind of the big one in the U.S. right? I would separate the guy that drove the car into a group of quote unquote leftist people and say that that was not presumably in the interest of the people that were fighting against the leftist agenda, right? There's too many nuances to say that violence is ever an approach that is appropriate in this society. I'm more for everyone speak their mind, period. I will never ban somebody in my chat for saying anything, period. I think that's the approach that everyone needs to take if they're actually trying to enact any sort of political change in this society. Is that enough? I don't know. Go on.
Whitewashed leader with ideas that they can take out of context and use to their own agenda. That's why you see so many conservatives put that fucking quote up about, I dream of from his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. I'm not gonna fucking paraphrase MLK again and fuck it up.
But I got you. Yeah, they revisionist history. Every MLK day without fail, it always happens. You're just like, trust me. I vomited a little bit in my mouth whenever was it
Tommy Lauren has done it.
Tommy Lauren, was it Rand Paul?
They try to claim
Mike Vance. Oh yeah. MLK Jr. he was a Republican. My God, he was part of the GOP. He was on our side. These crazy leftists right here. Yeah, they're wild. They want to take your freedom.
That's what they have to do though. When you get somebody who ultimately was so right about everything he did.
Yeah, but he didn't do that originally. My point was, while he was alive, they killed him. But while he was alive,
I'm not denying that at all. But point is that when the dust clears and everybody knows, like, damn, that guy was like right about everything and way ahead of his time, they have no other way to go. They can't keep arguing against him. I mean, maybe you'll find somebody in like the backwoods of Mississippi wears Confederate flag overalls who might be the one person remaining who's like, yeah, fuck that guy. But like everybody else, now the right has to try to claim him. And I think that's like a sign of honestly like the devastating correctness of the left over the years.
Yeah, I just don't.
It's pretty easy to envelop.
As far as like
right
political
wing
figures who are still vilified to this day,
versus the
like Fred Hampton or
only have to have
Malcolm
certain
X,
views
I would say
to
that they were
kind of
also
go to the right
devastatingly correct as well, and you agreed to that as well. But they're still
Well,
vilified.
not on everything. Not on everything, to be clear. Malcolm, I think post Mecca was pretty much right about everything, but pre Mecca, I think he was wrong about quite a bit.
I mean, sure, he was. I don't know enough to.
Yeah, he would have called me a devil because I'm white, and he admitted that. Like, he thought all white people were bad. Now,
Okay.
to be fair to him, in his personal experience, all white people were bad to him. But it's obviously
We're all
a fallacy
Yakubian devils, okay?
Yeah, it's a fallacy to then say all white people are bad.
He's
but
talking about an
post
interesting
Mecca, he
concept.
obviously became a lot more like
ACLU
Martin King.
only cites.
But yeah, I know quite a bit about his life. I studied him
views.
In
That's
detail, and
truth.
because I was actually most of all the speakers who I've liked over the years, he was the number
I
one
know
most captivating.
Black
speaker to me.
supremacy.
I thought that he
is
was like one of the best
naturally
speakers of all
left-wing.
time.
Maybe that's right wing as well.
Yeah.
But they're
But
not
what I was
cited. For
ultimately what I was
example,
trying to
the
say
crime
is,
where,
I mean, they all had some pretty good takes, and some of them are vilified.
intelligent
Some of them are
was abducted
revised to
and
fit a more whitewashed narrative of
tortured
the
on
past.
Facebook.
In the case of
that happened
MLK,
with
but
it.
ultimately
Not
they were
included in
successful
their
in achieving their
statistics
results. And I care
of
more. I look at
any
this
sort
more
of,
from a pragmatic
like,
perspective. And if all else fails,
hate crime.
and the administration has shown over and over again that they
How
are
do you
not interested in
justify
protecting marginalized communities, and that these people
That's
have the capacity, these people on the
statistically
right,
correct.
like far right Nazis,
How
have
do
the
you
capacity
justify that
to
and
come
say
into your
that
community
this
and
narrative
actually
is
threaten
correct?
your not just your livelihood but
not
your
a
existence by legitimizing violence against you, by
But I look
dehumanizing
into
you,
this shit.
then I'm not going to stand in front of people who at least try to
Google
deplatform
it.
them.
Look
And if
at-
all else
look at the
fails, after that
ACLU
deplatforming efforts completely fail,
statistics on hate
take matters into their own hands. It's kind of like I'm not going to stop
It
someone
doesn't exist.
who
How do you
I'm not
justify
going to
that
sit here
position
and argue on the
and say
ethics
that,
of
you know,
a father,
we're unbiased?
punching
It's
a
absolutely
person
wrong.
who raped their daughter in the face in a moment of anger. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to
Yes,
talk about the optics of that either.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. How there's definitely like gray areas of the morality of violence, and even in certain circumstances, the legality of violence. But to talk about that specific issue, so on the issue
We
of
need some
immigration, we might have
violence
some
to
disagreements on the
offset
issue.
this shit.
What is legitimate and illegitimate? Like, what is a form of political violence that's unacceptable versus what is just kind of
Good question.
Oh, I can tell you right
implementing
now.
draconian immigration law?
Targeting civilians. There are obviously radical leftist movements who have been very successful in achieving results, and that would still to this day be considered like terror cells and whatnot, depending on who you're talking to. And I would say that as soon as you target, as soon as you go into non-combatant territory, as soon as you are no longer enacting violence against a police force or a military force, and you start targeting civilians specifically to cause commotion or mass terror, then I'm out. And there are plenty of leftists who would argue that that's acceptable as well. That's completely unacceptable for me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that. But I was talking on the flip side of the equation. In other words, what implementation of laws
Hard to hear me while they're talking.
At what point is it illegitimate authority versus at what point are you just kind of implementing a hawkish, draconian immigration policy that you and I might not agree with, but it also might not necessarily cross the line being an illegitimate form of political violence? What do you mean hawkish form of violence? I'll give an example. Undocumented immigration versus legal immigration, documented immigration. Do you say that entire distinction is nonsense? Or do you say there is a legitimate distinction there? Like, would you say I personally think it's nonsense. Or would you say only attempted deportations of documented immigrants are illegitimate forms of violence?
Well, do you? Well, do you agree with state-sanctioned violence because that isn't objective and or non-biased as well? Sorry, you talking about the, for example, Obama bombing hospitals and things of that nature? I'll leave you with that. Or are you talking about violence within the nation? I guess I'm questioning what you mean by state-sanctioned violence. Could you cite an individual occurrence of what you're talking about?
Like as unreasonable as people are saying, because a very high percentage of it was undocumented immigrants who were also violent criminals. Now the problem is, if he does that with non-violent criminals, then I don't like it. And if he does that with undocumented immigrants who weren't violent criminals, then I definitely don't like it. I think maybe the only exception on that front would be a time thing. Like if they've been here less than a certain amount of time, then I think it's actually a little more reasonable if you want to people. If they've been here for like more than a couple of years or whatever, then it's just gross and you're like ripping somebody out of their life. So I think it's a complex conversation, and very rarely do people treat it with the kind of nuance like we're treating it right now.
Well, I would be curious to see what the numbers are, but I'm fairly certain that like Obama changed the definition of a certain kind of removal, right? Where he started considering like people that are being stopped at the border as deportation as well. Now, isn't that the main distinction, and that's why the numbers got mixed up?
I'm not sure, but I'm gonna see if I can find the number the first time.
Yeah, I'll
like
do
80-something%.
Simitan, can you
Before
can
we
you
go
hear
further,
me,
I think it's
bro?
important we try to establish the framing here on like what's the
Simitan, can you hear me, bro? You said, well, do you agree with state-sanctioned violence because that isn't objective or non-biased as well? Absolutely, I agree with that. But I need you to qualify that with an instance of state-sanctioned violence. Tell me what you're talking about.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like around 5 years on average, but I don't know. Well, some people get it over 10 years. But
this is actually one of the arguments that conservatives use to try to bolster their racial politics. Is they talk about how, well, why can't black people do better? Asian people do really well, and they're a minority. Like, what's
Oh my god.
but the reason why that's complete and utter bullshit is because it's actually not even totally true, because it depends on specifically which Asian immigrant you're talking about, because as a general rule, Asian immigrants from certain countries do really well economically because they're already coming from money, and then from certain, I think I forget exactly, don't quote me on this, guys, but I think like
Nothing?
Vietnamese immigrants have a lower
I feel like I've given you enough.
from other Asian countries, and so they try to use that argument to put down black people and act like other minorities do well, and it's like, well, no, a lot of the minorities who are doing well by your standards are people who came from money already. So it bolsters actually the left-wing argument when you think about it, because the argument from the left is basically when you give people a chance and you give them equal opportunity and you give them, an economic foot to stand on, well, then they're much more likely to do well.
All right.
Yeah, well, if you're rushing to find reasons as to why black people are bad and seeking to blame them for the material conditions in which they have had to exist for generations, then you're probably not going to make a distinction between different sects of Asian people, and you're probably not going to care too much about whether they're wealthy or not, because that it's just you're racist.
Yeah, you're just gonna lump them all together. Are you Japanese or?
Lumpy dumpy dumpy.
Well, you got India, Sri Lanka.
I'm not a fan.
Going on there.
Yeah.
They don't even consider. They don't even think India is like in Asia, probably for all we know.
Yo, Kai, you are a lot further left than Jank is, though. I think, like because I constantly criticize Jank as he just like is not open-minded to reading theory, or he's not even open-minded. Like he thinks like Chomsky is a joke. You know what I mean?
What? If he thinks Chomsky's a joke,
he thinks anarchy. He thinks anarchy is a meme. Like he thinks anarchism is like a meme ideology, but mostly because again, this is and Cenk is a perfect example of this. Okay, a perfect example of what I'm about to say. When you are a product of the best capitalist institutions, my man went to Columbia Law and he went to Wharton Business for undergrad, and he still is completely. It just has a complete blind spot when it comes to leftist theory, and he's incredibly well read, and he's an open-minded guy. But there you have it. This is a testament to how capitalist institutions create this dogma that all manner of leftist theory that achieve, that are very well respected in academia all around the world are considered nonsense and oftentimes ignored, or worse, vilified by our institutions.
Yeah. Love that shit.
Inched further and further left. There was a time when he said he was for a public option and not for Medicare for all. And there was also a time where he was in agreement with Destiny on trade, and now he's more with us on trade. So he has, and even on intervention, he used to say, I'm a mild interventionist, and now he's gone more leftist in his, and more non-interventionist in his approach. Now, we'll know he's there when he starts talking about non-intervention.
As soon as I ask for a source, he leaves. That's cool.
Did you accidentally summon?
Right now, he still doesn't.
No, I didn't.
Foreign policy through the perspective of, okay, do we even have a right to do what we're doing? Like, do we even have a right to intervene in Venezuela? Because once you even have that conversation, you're buying into a premise, and that premise is international law is irrelevant. We can do whatever we want to do. It's our choice. And he's still stuck on that very American-centric level of analysis where it's like everything's possible and everything's a conversation, and you don't bring into the conversation.
All right, folks. I think we're gonna call it.
Which that's the thing that always appealed to me most about Chomsky was I always said about him, he's the last person on the planet that actually gives a shit about international law. Like he actually makes him so genius is he does the very basic thing of like, let me apply the law and see what's going on.
Even based on my first email to him. Like, when I look back on it,